My husband's daughter from his first marriage tried to claim his house through a will, but court revealed the most terrifying truth. I'm 45 years old. I've been married to my husband, Michael, for 10 years now. He's 50. We were both in our early 30s when we first met at a local art gallery. We were standing in front of the same painting and started talking about it. It felt like instant connection, the kind where you feel like you've known someone your whole life. Michael asked me out, and the more time we spent together, the deeper that feeling became. I'm the oldest of 3 children. My family never had much money. We survived, but luxuries were rare. Fast food was something we only had on birthdays. Our father taught us early on that hard work was the only way forward. I studied relentlessly, worked my way into college on my own, and even modeled part-time to support myself. By graduation, I had no student debt. I kept climbing professionally and was working as a junior lawyer when Michael and I met. Michael's background was very different. His family was financially comfortable. His father had a well-paid position with strong benefits, so money was never a concern for them. His parents paid for his college, and thanks to his father's influence, Michael landed an internship at the same company. From there, he built his own career through genuine effort and dedication. Despite our different upbringings, we bonded deeply over a shared love of art and music. That's what brought us together. Michael has a daughter from his previous marriage, Candace. From the very beginning, she disliked me. She was distant, cold, and avoided conversations whenever we were in the same room. It felt like she blamed me for her parents' divorce, even though I met Michael long after it was finalized. I understood her pain and tried to give her time and space. For context, Michael and his ex-wife, Amelia, were married only 3 years. They met in college and married young. After the wedding, everything changed. Amelia stayed home while Michael worked long hours. One day, Michael returned early from a business trip and found Amelia in bed with his best friend, Tom. In a single moment, he lost both his marriage and his closest friendship. Devastated, Michael filed for divorce. The process was brutal. Amelia fought aggressively to keep the house, even though it legally belonged to Michael. The conflict escalated into a bitter custody battle over Candace. Because of Amelia's infidelity, the court ruled against her claim to the house, but granted shared custody so Candace could maintain a relationship with both parents. Amelia never forgave losing the house. Over the years, she filled Candace's head with resentment toward her father. Michael chose not to tell his daughter about her mother's affair, trying to protect her from the truth. I learned all of this early in our relationship. Michael wanted complete honesty, and I respected that deeply. At one point, Michael invited Candace to join us on a trip to Africa, hoping it would help us bond. I truly believed it might change things. Unfortunately, it was a disaster. Candace was hostile the entire trip. She snapped at me constantly, had angry outbursts, and hurled insults whenever I got close to Michael. She called me a gold digger more than once. Michael scolded her, but she only smirked, making it clear she had no intention of accepting me. Despite everything, our love was strong. After a whirlwind romance, we got married. It was a small ceremony with close friends and family. Candace and Amelia were invited. Neither showed up. The first years of our marriage were wonderful. We traveled often and focused on our careers. I loved my job and had no intention of giving it up. Amelia moved in with Tom after the divorce. Candace lived in an apartment Michael had bought for her and worked as a social media manager at a reputable company. 3 years into our marriage, we welcomed our son, Nick. My pregnancy was difficult, and Candace made it worse. Whenever Michael wasn't around, she made cruel comments about my weight and appearance. She told me Michael would leave me because I was fat and disgusting now. It shattered me. When I finally told Michael, he immediately stopped allowing Candace to visit our home. From then on, they only met in public places to protect my well-being. After Nick was born, we were overjoyed. I chose to return to work after maternity leave, and we hired a nanny to help. Financially, we were comfortable, but my independence meant deeply to me. Candace's hostility only grew after Nick's birth. At family gatherings, she would criticize him, mock him, and intentionally upset him until he ran to us in tears. I could tolerate her hatred toward me, but not toward my child. I banned her from our home entirely, and we stopped hosting family events. As we grew older, Michael and I began thinking seriously about the future. We decided to draft wills to put everything in order. Michael had already bought Candace an apartment, so he named me and our son as beneficiaries of the family home. Candace would receive his savings, investments, and remaining assets. I had my own assets, which I planned to leave entirely to Nick. We both felt this was fair and ensured our son's stability. When Amelia and Candace found out about the will, all hell broke loose. I don't know who told them, maybe Michael, maybe his parents, but their reaction was explosive. Amelia called Michael demanding the house, claiming she was his first wife and deserved it. Michael refused. He reminded her that he paid child support, covered Candace's education, bought her an apartment, and would continue supporting her, but the house was meant for his son. Furious, Amelia sent me a long message filled with insults and threats. I showed it to Michael. He told me not to respond and to block her immediately. The next day, Candace showed up at our door, visibly upset. I knew exactly why she was there. To avoid exposing Nick to conflict, I arranged for my parents to pick him up. Once we were alone, Candace made her demand clear. She insisted that Nick and I give up the house because as Michael's first child, she believed it was rightfully hers. Despite my anger, I stayed silent and let Michael speak. He calmly told her that he had always provided for her and always would. Michael assured Candace that he intended to leave her his savings. However, he also had a responsibility toward me and our son. As his wife, securing the family home for us was his way of ensuring our safety and stability. Candace immediately shifted the blame onto me, claiming that I should be the one to do the right thing. I calmly stated that I fully supported my husband's decision, which only made her angrier. She raised her voice and threatened to take me to court. At that point, I had no desire to escalate the conflict and asked her to leave us alone. As expected, a few weeks later, I received a court summons. Candace and Amelia had filed a lawsuit against me over the property. The claim stated that I had married Michael for his money and manipulated him into leaving me the family home. Michael and I consulted our lawyer, who confidently told us that neither Candace nor Amelia had any solid legal standing. Still, despite his reassurance, I couldn't shake my anxiety, especially because I didn't want our son dragged into this mess. As the court date approached, the tension in our home became unbearable. In court, Amelia's lawyer was relentless. He tried to argue that Michael was obligated to prioritize his firstborn daughter above everyone else. They pushed for a full jury trial to determine ownership of the house. Because we lived in Colorado, a jury trial was indeed required, making everything far more complicated. The looming trial kept Michael and me under constant stress. Amelia's legal team played dirty, digging into our past, searching for anything they could twist against us. Our lawyer did his best, but the pressure was overwhelming. Then something completely unexpected happened. Tom, the same man Michael had caught Amelia cheating with years ago, contacted us and insisted on meeting. Michael had cut him out of his life entirely after the affair and didn't want to see him, but I convinced him to listen. I felt that maybe this could help resolve everything faster. When Tom arrived, we half expected it to be another scheme orchestrated by Amelia's lawyer. Instead, Tom came to confess something devastating.
Michael sat frozen as Tom admitted that his affair with Amelia had lasted far longer than anyone knew. It had begun even before her pregnancy. I held my breath as Tom continued. When Amelia became pregnant, she told Tom she believed the child was actually his. However, because Michael was financially stable, she chose to hide the truth and remain married to him. Tom begged her to tell Michael the truth, but she refused every time. I was stunned. Amelia had carried this lie for decades, all while aggressively fighting for the house, knowing full well she was hiding something monstrous. Tom explained that he stayed silent because he believed Amelia loved him. But seeing the pain this lawsuit caused us finally made him realize who she really was. He broke down, crying, and begged Michael for forgiveness. Michael remained silent, completely shattered. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak watching my husband, a man who had believed his entire life that Candace was his daughter, learn that it had all been built on a lie. I had tolerated Amelia's cruelty and Candace's insults for years in the hope of maintaining some semblance of peace, but now there was no point in staying quiet. I immediately contacted our lawyer and shared Tom's confession. He explained that for it to hold weight in court, we needed concrete evidence, a DNA test. So we invited Candace over for dinner under the pretense of reconciliation. The plan was simple: discreetly obtain a glass or utensil for testing. Candace agreed to come, though she behaved exactly as she had always had, rude, cruel, and demeaning toward both me and my son. She mocked us, confident that she and her mother would win the case and that I would soon lose everything. I stayed silent, hoping this would be the last time we ever had to endure her behavior. After she left, we immediately handed her cup to our lawyer. On the morning of the court hearing, we received confirmation. Tom had told the truth. Candace was not Michael's biological daughter. I felt a wave of relief, followed immediately by deep sorrow for my husband, who had been manipulated and deceived for so many years. I told our lawyer I was ready to testify. He agreed it was the best course of action. Standing before the jury, I felt a storm of emotions: anger at Amelia's deception, compassion for Michael, and fierce determination to protect my family. I answered every question honestly. I spoke about my background, my career, and how I had never depended on Michael financially. I described the years of emotional abuse, mockery, and humiliation I endured from Amelia and Candace. Screenshots were presented as evidence. I explained how Candace had refused to attend our wedding and later verbally attacked our son. Then I revealed Tom's confession to the jury, the truth about Candace's paternity and the secret Amelia had hidden for decades. Candace stared at me in disbelief, whispering urgently to her lawyer. Our attorney then presented the DNA test results, confirming everything I had said. I watched Amelia's face crumble as the truth finally caught up with her. Candace looked like her world was collapsing, just as ours had when we learned the truth. The courtroom was silent. Everything was clear. Amelia and Candace had no legal claim left. The jury didn't take long to reach their verdict. The judge ruled that the family home would remain with us, exactly as Michael had intended. Candace and Amelia were found to have no legal rights to the property. In the days following the trial, reactions from friends and relatives were mixed. Most understood our decision and supported us. Others believed it was cruel to reveal the truth publicly, and Candace's life had been destroyed. But the truth is simple. The lies destroyed it, long before we ever stepped into that courtroom.
At the very least, I hope this situation became a life lesson for Candace. I truly believe that one day she may understand that this kind of strategy doesn't work.
The truth always comes out eventually, and when it does, there are consequences. As for Michael, I think if Candace had treated him with genuine respect and kindness over the years, even after learning the truth about her biological father, he might have chosen to leave her something more. But that bridge had already been burned. Update 1. 3 days have passed since my last update. I read every message and piece of advice. Many people suggested that Candace might have already known about her mother's lie, but I truly don't believe that's the case. I saw her face in court when the DNA results were revealed. That shock was real. Winning the case lifted an enormous weight off my shoulders. I've decided not to dwell on the opinions of relatives who think we acted wrongly. We didn't drag ourselves into court. Amelia and Candace did. We simply told the truth. What worries me now is my husband. Michael is still struggling to process everything. His world has been turned upside down. Since learning that Candace isn't biologically his, he barely eats and hardly sleeps. I can't imagine the pain of realizing that the child you loved and raised was part of such a deep betrayal. Amelia already put him through hell during the divorce. Now, learning that Tom, the man who slept with his wife, was also the biological father of his first child, has shattered him completely. I suggested therapy. He needs professional help to process this level of trauma. I scheduled an appointment for him, and he starts next week. Update 2. A month has passed, and we're slowly finding our footing again. Michael has been attending therapy regularly, and while healing will take time, I can see small improvements. Unexpectedly, Candace reached out to us last week. Honestly, I assumed she would never speak to us again. She called to apologize for everything we had gone through. I wasn't sure whether it was genuine remorse or simply anger toward her mother, but I chose not to interrogate her intentions. She admitted she had always been jealous of me, believing that I had taken her father away. She confessed she hated me, something I already knew. For years, she believed her father had betrayed her mother. But during the trial, when the truth came out, and it became clear that Amelia was the one who cheated, Candace realized she had been living a lie her entire life. She begged Michael not to leave her. He told her that regardless of biology, he would always be her father. That broke her completely. She cried harder than I had ever seen. She also apologized to me for how she treated me and said she hoped I could forgive her someday. I didn't pretend everything was suddenly fine. It wasn't. I told her honestly that I needed time before I could even think about being in the same room with her. Right now, my priority is my own family, my husband and my son. During the court battle, my child didn't get the attention he deserved. I'm planning a quiet family vacation to help us heal and reconnect. If anything else happens, I'll update again. Update 3. 3 months passed with no contact from Amelia until she showed up at our door. I hesitated to let her in, but I didn't want a public scene with neighbors listening. We made it clear that any outburst would result in the police being called. She came in tears. Tom had left her. He told her to move out by the end of the month and made it clear he no longer wanted to marry her. She had nowhere to go. She wanted to move in with Candace, who had absolutely refused. We learned that after the trial, Candace completely cut off contact with her mother, blaming her for years of manipulation and lies. Amelia came to us, hoping we would convince Candace to let her stay. Before I could even respond, Michael finally snapped. For the first time, I saw him truly lose his composure. He told Amelia that the apartment was bought solely for Candace, and only Candace had the right to decide who lived there. He reminded Amelia that she had never apologized for the affair and now expected help. He said he was glad Tom had finally seen her for who she really was and walked away. Amelia tried to justify herself, saying she was afraid of being thrown out while pregnant if she had told the truth back then. I couldn't listen anymore. We gave her a chance to speak, but there was nothing left to say. I asked her to leave. After she left, Michael contacted Candace to warn her if her mother moved in, getting her out later would be nearly impossible. Candace assured him that would never happen. She planned to change the locks and formally tell her mother she was done. As for me, I'm exhausted beyond words. Recently, Michael and I have been seriously discussing selling our house and moving to another state, leaving all of this behind for good. For the sake of our son and our marriage, we need peace. The decision isn't easy, but after Amelia's visit, it became clear that she would never stop trying to insert herself into our lives. Michael agreed. His job allows him to work remotely, and I'm willing to start over at a new firm if it means a healthier future for our family. Next month, we'll begin the process of selling our home. If all goes well, by the end of the year, we'll be starting a new life somewhere far away from all this toxicity. It's time to close this chapter and finally move forward.
I refuse to let my husband's brother move in with us, the same man who once peed on my belongings and tried to blame my cat for it. I'm 29, my husband Ted and I have been together for 10 years. We met back in college and have been inseparable ever since. I graduated earlier than him and took a semester off to travel while he finished his studies because we were planning to move to another state afterward. But Ted had to retake several classes, so when I returned, we couldn't move yet, and I didn't have my own place. I moved in with him and his roommate, who also happened to be his older brother, Ash. He's 32. Before I moved in, I made sure Ted talked to Ash about me bringing my cat. They already had an old dog, but Ash said it was fine. About 3 weeks after I moved in, I started noticing a strong smell of urine in our bedroom. We couldn't figure out where it was coming from. My cat is perfectly litter trained, so I knew it wasn't him. The dog couldn't go upstairs due to joint problems, so that wasn't possible either. Then I started finding clothes on the floor that smelled like pee. I asked Ted about it, but he said he had no clue. After 3 miserable months of this, someone was still peeing on my clothes twice a week. I asked Ash if he'd been bringing the dog upstairs, and he denied it. By that point, I was at my limit. I started keeping everything tidy, but I still found urine in my shoes, on pillows, and even decorative items. One day, after I completely broke down in tears, Ted suggested maybe my cat was marking territory, since the urine was only on my things and it was a new environment. But anyone who's ever had a cat knows that cat urine smells nothing like human urine. I knew it wasn't my cat. So I set up a hidden camera in our bedroom. I was paying rent, and Ted knew about the camera, so I figured it was the best way to find out what was really going on. And the footage showed Ash sneaking into our room and peeing on my stuff. When I saw the video, I packed my things and my cat and went to stay with a friend until Ted finished school. After that, we moved out. When the truth came out, I refused to talk to Ash. He disgusted me. Ted handled all communication with him. Since then, I've barely interacted with him. He was one of the groomsmen at our wedding, but we stay away from each other at family gatherings. During the pandemic, Ash lost his job and apartment. Now he's struggling financially and asked if he could stay with us. And honestly, I don't want him anywhere near me. The man was 25 when he did that, a fully grown adult. Now Ted's entire family is calling and texting me saying I'm heartless for leaving him homeless during a pandemic. But they weren't the ones whose clothes he peed on. I was. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should let it go. But every time I think about it, I just can't. I know I'm right. I have every reason to not want him in my home. But even Ted is starting to say he can't just abandon his brother, especially since the job market here is better for his field. For context, yes, Ash went to therapy after the incident. His mom made him go. That's when we learned why he did it. Apparently, Ted and Ash had always been very close, and Ash saw me as a threat who was stealing his best friend, so he thought doing something that awful would drive us apart. Instead, it only made Ted stop talking to him completely for a long time. The therapist later suggested they make amends, and Ted's mom helped them reconnect, but it was agreed that I'd never have to speak to Ash again or let him into our home. As for the wedding, it was mostly for our parents. We would have been fine with a small ceremony, but since I was the first of my sisters to get married, my family wanted something big. All my sisters were bridesmaids, and all of Ted's brothers, including Ash, were groomsmen. I didn't have to talk to him or take pictures with him, so I didn't care. Why can't another family member take him in? Because we live on the East Coast and the rest of the family is on the West Coast. Ted's job opportunities are much better here, so moving is not an option. I'm even trying to convince his brothers, there are 8 of them, to pitch in and help Ash stay over there. Ted's family has this forget and forget mentality. They overlook things I find appalling, like stealing cars, forging degrees, and misusing money. So of course they think Ash's behavior was a one-time mistake. Did he ever apologize? Only to Ted, never to me, and that still hurts. I even considered forgiving him, but I realized it would only open the door for him to come back into my life, and I can't risk that. Did he pay for the stuff he ruined? No. I didn't even know it was him at first. I just washed my things. After I saw the footage, I threw out everything that had been soiled, except for 2 pairs of shoes I still haven't replaced. Ted, bless him, is the best man I know. When this all happened, he was shocked and completely cut off his brother. Later, after their mom and the therapist pushed him to reconcile, they made peace, but Ted never once pressured me to forgive Ash or let him in. He told me it's okay if I never want to see his brother again. And honestly, I love Ted enough to tolerate Ash's presence only when absolutely necessary, like on holidays or big family events. But that's it. I will never live under the same roof as that man again. Update 1. Each part of this story was written at different times over the past few days. So, as many of you suggested, I showed the post to Ted. After reading the comments, he realized that he'd been wrong, not just toward me, but in how he'd let his family treat me. He apologized over and over, saying he should have done more back then, stood up for me, set boundaries, and demanded better behavior from his brother. He made it clear that Ash moving in with us was absolutely out of the question. Ted also reached out to people in his professional field to see if there were any job openings for Ash. One of his contacts happened to work at the same company where Ash had been employed, and here's what Ted found out. Ash hadn't been fired. He just left voluntarily. But his job was still open for him if he wanted to come back. Ted decided to drive over and talk to him in person while I was at work. We live a couple of hours away from Ash. For context, I work 2 jobs, one from 4 p.m. to midnight and another part-time during the day. Not because Ted can't support us, but because I actually like what I do and it keeps me busy and happy. But when Ted got to Ash's place, he found something that triggered a chain of events and revelations that honestly left me more sad than angry. Yeah, I know, people will probably call me spineless again, say I should be furious. But I'm just so tired. I just want to sleep. Still, I feel like I owe you all closure after so many of you reached out, whether kindly or harshly. This is the shorter version of what's happened since my first post. Let's start with Ted's brothers. There are 10 of them. Brother number 1, doctor, military background, wife, 3 kids. Brother number 2, surgeon, wife, 2 dogs, a bearded dragon. Brother number 3, engineer, engaged, 1 dog. Brother number 4, teacher and researcher, wife, 1 child. Brother number 5, works in IT, married. Brother number 6, doctor, single, open to meeting someone. Brother number 7, chef or businessman, wife, 1 child. Brother number 8, car salesman, wife, 3 kids, aquarium fish. Brother number 9, accountant, wife, 1 cat. Brother number 10, Ash. If I say wife X, I mean the wife of that brother, not that they have multiple wives. Anyway, Ted and I talked about everything you pointed out. He apologized, we cried together, promised to be better, and decided to see therapists separately. If both our therapists recommend couples therapy later, we'll do that too. Now, back to the situation. Ted's contact confirmed that Ash hadn't actually been fired, he just left. That made Ted furious, so he went to Ash's house to confront him. Ash wasn't home, but Ted had a spare key for emergencies, so he went in and waited.
At one point, he needed to use the bathroom, but the guest one was locked, so he went into Ash's room to use his. That's when he found a situation. That's how he phrased it when he called me. Ted phoned me and said I should stay home, that he'd be back later because he had to involve his family and didn't want to burden me with more chaos. My stomach dropped, but I just said, "Please be careful and come home soon." 2 hours later, wife number 8 called me crying, asking if I was okay. I said I was fine, but hadn't heard from Ted, except for a vague message about a situation. She asked if I wanted to know what was going on. I said yes. She started apologizing and said that none of them had known the full story. Apparently, brother number 5 read my post and called brother number 7 to complain that I'd aired family laundry online. But when your brother-in-law literally pees on someone's belongings, it's not exactly a common enough story to confuse with another family. Brother number 7 read the post and thought some details didn't add up, so he called brother number 2, who then called his mom, and by that point the entire family had read it. I'd missed a few calls from brother number 2 and brother number 6, but I was at work and didn't answer. And here's what came out next. The whole therapist story about Ash, fake. The so-called therapist was actually just a friend of his pretending to be one. No license, no education, nothing. He pretended for 3 years just to get his mom off his back. She knew. She covered for him. Said she'd forgiven worse things from the other sons. It all came out when brother number 2 asked her why Ash had never apologized to me. They all assumed he already had, and that I'd forgiven him since I have a reputation for being too soft. Plus, they thought he'd only done it a few times, not over the course of several months. Anyway, wife number 8 told me that brothers number 3, 4, and 8 were already driving to meet Ted because he'd called for help. That freaked me out. She suggested I talk to wife number 1 for emotional support. Then Ted called again, saying he was sorry and that his brothers were handling it. I told him to stop sugarcoating things and tell me what was really going on. That's when he said it. Ash has serious psychological issues. He hates me. In his bathroom, there are pictures of me covered in urine and semen. And apparently, there were photos of brother number 1's 14-year-old daughter, too. I have no idea what she ever did to deserve that. Ted said he searched Ash's bedroom and found old family photo albums that should have been with their parents. Inside, the faces of certain people, ours, were cut out, scratched, or vandalized. When he found one of our wedding photos, yellowed and soaked in urine, he dropped the album in disgust. Then he saw Ash's cat hiding under the bed, terrified and filthy. When he coaxed her out, she was covered in dried urine and semen. Ted called brother number 6, told him what he found, and said they needed to take the cat to a vet immediately. Brother number 6 told him to stay put until they figured out where Ash was. The brothers started coordinating. Brother number 1 was furious and threatened to kill Ash over the photos of his daughter. The rest were between anger and panic. Then Ted called his mom to confront her about covering for Ash. She broke down crying and admitted she'd known the brothers had bullied Ash when they were younger and that she felt guilty for never protecting him. So she tried to make it up to him by constantly defending him as an adult. Ted remembered how when we got married, his mom hovered around Ash constantly. We thought it was just her being caring, but now it all made sense. After she confessed, Ted called me again, apologized, and told me everything. I was so shaken, I called my boss and took the rest of the day off. I just couldn't function. I decided to drive to him because someone had to look after the cat. He told me not to come, said I shouldn't see what he saw, but I couldn't sit still. About an hour into the drive, I got a notification from our smart doorbell, a delivery. It was a bouquet of sunflowers, Ted's favorite flowers. I asked the delivery guy to read the card out loud. They were from Ash. The card said something like, "She set me up by airing our problems.
Whatever happens next, it's her fault. I had to pull over and cry. I asked my neighbor to take the flowers, throw them away, and send Ted a photo for evidence. Then I drove to my sister's because I had no idea what else to do. I'm devastated. I loved this family. I thought they loved me back. Now I feel like I've lost them all. I'm terrified for my husband, and even for Ash, though he terrifies me. I don't know what's gonna happen next. Ted's brothers eventually found Ash. There were shouting, fighting, and eventually an ER visit. Ash is now under psychiatric supervision. Ted's mother keeps trying to contact me. I don't know if it's to apologize or to get updates, but I'm done with her. Sadly, Ash's cat didn't make it. The vet discovered severe kidney damage that couldn't be treated. The clinic even called the police when brother number 4 brought the cat in, suspecting abuse. It's all such a nightmare. Ted has cut contact with about half of his family. I hope it stays that way. We're both in therapy now, trying to rebuild ourselves. I know I'll never get an apology, and maybe that's for the best. All I know is, no one from that family will ever live in my house again, under no circumstances.
Update 2. Hi everyone. I want to start by saying thank you, truly, for the overwhelming support, kindness, and love I've received from complete strangers online. Your words, messages, and compassion mean more than you can imagine. I promise I'll start replying soon. It's just, the past few days have been incredibly hard. My therapist told me to keep writing, to organize my thoughts and process what's happened. So since some of you are still following my story, I guess these posts have turned into a kind of journal for me. It's been almost 2 weeks since I opened Pandora's box, meaning since I refused to let my husband's brother move in with us. And you all know what happened after that. I'll forever be grateful to everyone who helped me see that some things need to be discussed, even if doing so turned my entire life into chaos. A lot of you asked similar questions, so I'll answer the main ones here. Right now, I barely speak to anyone except brother number 6. He's always been my favorite, the most kind-hearted and level-headed of them all. Honestly, we should have followed his example from the beginning and kept some distance from the family. He's been the most supportive through everything, and he even apologized for all the crap that went down. I talked to brother number 1 and his wife. I offered help in any way I could, but they politely declined, saying I'd already done enough. I'm not sure if that was sincere or just polite distance, but either way, I'm staying out of their orbit for now. Most of the other brothers apologized too. A few of them admitted their mistakes, both in this situation and in the past. Honestly, this family is going to keep a whole generation of therapists in business. I suggested therapy for all of them because, even though I might have been the trigger, this goes way deeper than me. Now, about my mother-in-law. Some people wrote that maybe she's been a victim of manipulation and abuse her whole life. I'm not denying or confirming that. It's not my place. What I do know is that she's had a rough life, but after everything that happened, we'll never speak to her again. She called us screaming that we'd destroyed her family. Her exact words to my husband were, "I worked for years to keep this family together. I forgave everyone for everything they ever did. And this is how you repay me? By letting some bitch tear us apart?" So yeah, that bridge is gone. Ted's coping the best he can. He's in therapy too, working through his guilt and grief. He keeps apologizing even though I know none of this was his fault. He said that what his best friend and brother did to me will haunt him for a long time. We've been reading some of your comments together. He's thankful for everyone who sees him as someone trying to make amends, but he says he hasn't earned forgiveness yet. He believes it will take years to truly make things right. He even told me that he'd understand if I wanted a divorce, that he couldn't live with himself knowing what his family did to me. But I told him no. I still love him deeply, and I know he isn't responsible for what happened.
We'll see how therapy goes for both of us. Where's Ash now? He's still under psychiatric supervision. He's asked to see Ted, but Ted refuses. He did send him a letter, though. I don't know what's in it, and I don't want to. Ted assured me that I'll never have to see Ash again. Once doctors deem it safe, he'll be transferred to the West Coast, where the rest of the family can deal with him. Brother number 3 is currently overseeing his condition and agrees it's best to keep him far away from us. Ted still discusses the medical updates with him, but I stay out of it, and that's perfectly fine by me. Following your advice, Ted and I took a break. I quit one of my jobs and switched to remote work for the other. We've been staying at my dad's seaside apartment while Ted's on leave. His boss has been very understanding. It's mid-January now. The weather is gloomy, but the ocean view helps calm my mind. Being far from all that madness has been healing. I also changed my phone number so Ted's family can't reach me anymore. And honestly, it's the best decision I've made. It's just me, Ted, and our cat here. I filed for a restraining order against Ash. I'm not sure what legal steps brother number 1 is taking for his daughter, but I know he made her delete her social media accounts. If there are further actions, that's their call. We're moving soon, not sure where yet, but both of us know that our current house no longer feels like home. Over the next few weeks, we'll start looking for a new place closer to my family. As for what was in the locked guest bathroom, sorry to disappoint, but there were no body parts or horror movie scenes. It was just more of the same stuff they'd already found in the main bathroom. I don't think Ash is some serial killer in the making. He's just a severely disturbed man with self-destructive coping mechanisms and deeply unhealthy attachments. One commenter suggested he might have some deep-rooted hatred or distorted view of women, and honestly, I agree. All of his disturbing behavior was directed at women. Me, his niece, and even his cat, Sunny. But again, I'm not a professional. How am I doing? It depends on the day. Some days are easier, some aren't. I have therapy sessions every other day. And thank you to those who suggested bringing white noise or headphones into the bathroom. It's actually helped a lot. My sisters take turns visiting me, so I'm rarely alone for long. Many of you asked what Ash's childhood was like. What could have caused this? These are Ted's words. When you grow up with 8 older brothers, you become an easy target for criticism, comparisons, and impossible expectations. When the older ones needed somewhere to unload their frustration, Ash was the weakest, the one they picked on. I'm not excusing anything, but there were things even I couldn't protect him from. Now, as an adult, I see how messed up it all was, and so do my brothers. We each have our own demons to fight. We didn't have a supportive family. Everything was swept under the rug instead of being addressed. It left us broken, unable to tell right from wrong. Some of us got better, thanks to our partners, jobs, and experience, but we still have a long way to go. We can't undo the past. All we can do is acknowledge it and try to be better tomorrow. Why didn't anyone check on his cat sooner? Because there was no reason to suspect anything. Sunny was never a very social cat, so during lockdown video calls, it made sense that she wasn't visible. We weren't visiting anyone during the pandemic, so we had no idea what was happening in his home. Before that, everything seemed fine. Him, the house, the cat. I truly don't know what signs we could have seen or how we could have prevented all this. And I'm so sorry for failing that innocent animal. The guilt of not being able to help her will stay with me forever. Some asked how 3 of Ted's 10 brothers managed to fly across the country so quickly to help. Well, there weren't always 10 brothers. And as for how they managed it, I don't know what to say. They realized how serious the situation was, took time off to leave, and came to help. Their wives handled things at home. That's all there is to it. People also ask how no one noticed anything earlier. Honestly, that's a question for Ted's family. I'm not close with them anymore. Ted says he didn't notice any signs, but admits his closeness to Ash might have blinded him to the truth. So that's my life right now. I'm tired, I'm sad, things still feel heavy, but I have a great therapist who keeps reminding me that I'm safe, that I'm okay, and that healing will take time. Sorry for the long update, and thank you, truly, for your kindness and for taking the time to read about my mess. Edit. I realize I caused confusion earlier. When I mentioned Ted having 10 brothers, I didn't mean there were only sons. It's not my story to fully tell, but from what I know, there were 3 sisters too. 2 died in childhood from health complications, which explains the big age gap between the older brothers and Ted and Ash. The 3rd sister's story is more complicated. She was born between brother number 4 and number 5. And yes, they had a lot of kids. They don't believe in contraception. Sorry again for the mix-up.
Update 3. Hey everyone. It's been about 2 months since all this chaos started. During that time, I've gotten tons of messages and comments asking for an update, most of them kind and supportive. Of course, there were a few nasty ones too, but at this point, I've made peace with the fact that it's just part of internet culture. First off, sorry it took me so long to write this. I know many of you are curious about what's been happening with Ted's family, but I really needed time to process everything. Anyway, here's another miserable little piece of the puzzle, so you can finally get some closure. So, Ted asked me to move out for a while. He's been struggling a lot emotionally, and said my presence was only making things harder for him. He's drowning in guilt, and dealing with all those skeletons from his family's closet is too heavy for anyone. We're not officially divorced, but we're not looking for a new place together either. We're still in the process of selling our old house. Ted's living there, and I've been staying with my parents. I honestly don't know what will happen once the house is sold, or what he really wants, but I promised to give him space. He did allow me to post this update, though, because despite some hateful messages, most of you have been incredibly kind and supportive. Now, as promised, here is the updated version of Ted's family tree, including the sisters. Brother number 1, doctor with a military background, married, 3 kids. Brother number 2, surgeon, married, has 2 dogs and a bearded dragon. Brother number 3, engineer, engaged, 1 dog. Brother number 4, teacher and researcher, married, 1 child. Sister number 1, deceased. Brother number 5, works in IT, married, not many details. Brother number 6, doctor, single, open to dating. Brother number 7, chef or businessman, married, 1 kid. Brother number 8, car salesman, married, 3 kids, and some fish. Sisters number 2 and 3, both deceased. Brother number 9, married, possibly divorced now, 1 cat. Brother number 10, Ash. Now, about the sisters. I only mentioned them this time because, well, the family story is already insane, and this just adds another layer. I didn't include them earlier because Ted never talks about them. For him, they've simply never existed. All 3 sisters were born and passed away before Ted was even conceived. So in his mind, he only has brothers. You guys came up with some wild theories, some surprisingly close to the truth, some totally unhinged, but honestly, given what we know about this family, a bit of insanity seems to run in their blood. Anyway, no, the sisters weren't murdered. Sisters number 2 and 3 were twins who died shortly after birth due to a developmental defect. Their lungs never fully formed. That's all Ted knows. I don't talk to his family anymore, so I can't confirm more details. Sister number 1 died in a motorcycle accident.
One of the brothers was driving, underage and drunk. I didn't mention this before because it wasn't my story to tell. It had nothing to do with my situation, and I still believe people deserve privacy, so I'm not saying which brother it was. Many of you also asked about the dark secrets Ted's mother supposedly forgave her sons for. I'll share only what's been openly discussed before. I won't name which brother did what, except for brother number 7, since I already told his story. So, here's what I know. Brothers 1 to 4 were the classic golden boys. Smart, athletic, high-achieving. That set the bar ridiculously high for the younger ones. The family expected every child to excel in school, sports, get a scholarship because paying for 10 college educations wasn't realistic, and build a successful career. But brother number 7 wanted none of that. He's a smart guy, but thought it was unfair that his life had to be a constant competition with his siblings. After high school, he told his parents he was going abroad to study culinary arts. His scholarship supposedly covered part of his tuition, but not housing. His parents were thrilled. Their son was going to become a world-famous chef. They agreed to help with expenses as long as he kept good grades and cooked at family gatherings. In reality, he moved to New York, shared an apartment with 4 roommates, and pretended to live abroad. This was before video calls were common, so it wasn't hard to pull off. He just needed to call his parents at times that matched the time zone difference. He even made up stories for family holidays. His parents sent him money for tuition and rent, but he invested it and eventually made a decent profit. Years later, he returned to the West Coast, claiming he was managing restaurants. The truth came out only when one of the nieces said she wanted to apply to the same school and asked him about it. By then, he was already financially stable, so there weren't major consequences. And to be fair, the man can really cook. He still handles Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners. Now for the rest of the family drama. Things I learned from Ted, his mom, or the brothers themselves, and for which none of them were ever punished. Stealing and completely wrecking at least 2 cars, same brother, both times. Another brother also stole a car. Leaving their grandmother alone for a week, even though they were supposed to care for her. Stealing and selling things from their own home. Fist fights that ended with police involvement. Other fights that didn't involve police but did end up with hospital visits. Skipping major school events, stealing trip money, or pocketing class funds. Public nudity, indecent behavior, and urinating in public, apparently a family tradition. One stalking incident that ended with a restraining order. Frequent teenage drinking and underage drunk driving. As for their father, last time I saw him, he was in an urn on their mother's mantle, hopefully still there. In life, he was an awful, misogynistic, abusive husband and father. Somehow, though, he managed to act like a decent grandpa. And before anyone judges, why did you let the kids near him? That's not on me. I don't have children. Ted's siblings do. Ted's parents were, and his mother still is, very traditional. They only ever cared about appearances, the image of a perfect family with proud sons and beautiful daughters. I'm not excusing them, but losing their daughters really broke them and the whole family dynamic. As for why they had more kids after that, they desperately wanted another girl. They tried twice more, then couldn't have children anymore. I don't know if they would have kept trying or if the infertility made things worse emotionally. As for Ash, I honestly don't know how he's doing. I'd love to say I don't care, but I do a little. Therapy has made me more empathetic, and I can see that he's a sick person. I just hope he gets better. Far, far away from me. And that's pretty much everything I can tell you about Ted's family. Big shout out to brother number 6, though. He's been supportive throughout all of this. Still single, by the way, and made me promise to mention that. So, if anyone on the West Coast is looking for a kind, attractive doctor from an absolutely bonkers family, here's your chance. As for me, things are still rough. I had to quit my second job after already leaving the first one. So, yeah, I'm unemployed and living with my parents right now. But my dad says he doesn't care as long as I'm okay, and I love him for that. I'm still going to therapy. It's the one thing keeping me grounded these days.
Update 4. Over the past year, I've written so many drafts of updates, some funny, some sad, a few drunken, but never posted any of them. I was waiting for the right ending to this entire saga. But now I understand. Real life doesn't have perfect endings. Things always keep happening. I just hope that, for all of us, this really is the end of the story, that I can finally move on, and that you'll all get some sense of closure, too. I also hope that writing this will bring me a little peace. I'm finally in a place where I can open up without being weighed down by guilt for staying silent so long. It honestly means a lot that so many of you kept checking in on me, sending kind messages, and caring. It feels surreal that almost a year has passed, and yet I still get sweet DMs from strangers wishing me happiness. If I didn't reply, please know I read every single message, and they warmed my heart. It's comforting to know there are still so many good people in the world, wishing well to someone they'll never meet. I'll admit, part of me is always scared to post updates. On one hand, there are real-life consequences. People have already managed to figure out who I am. On the other hand, every time I write one, it feels like drawing a line under something painful, and part of me wants to keep pretending it never happened. My therapist says that's not a healthy way to cope, which is why I'm here again. It's wild to think that all of this started just a few days after last New Year's. I still remember Ted and me curled up on the couch, wishing for 2021 to be full of adventures and new experiences. Well, wish granted, I guess. I'll be a lot more careful with what I wish for next time. I honestly don't even know what I'll do this New Year's. Maybe I'll take a small trip somewhere, just something to clear my head. What I don't want is to sit on the couch and replay everything in my mind again. Though I have to admit that couch was ridiculously comfortable, and I do miss it. I love Ted. A part of me probably always will. We spent so much of our lives together. He was my person. It still feels surreal that he's no longer in my life. In short, he asked for a divorce, just like that. It was as gentle a breakup as one can possibly have in our circumstances. We both cried through most of it. He kept calling, apologizing. I begged him not to leave. But as much as it hurt, I knew deep down that he needed this to heal from everything that happened. We're still friends. We were best friends for so many years that even if the romantic part is gone, there will always be a bond. I know you're not here to read about my broken heart, though. You want the messy family updates. So I'll share what I know. Just note that since Ted and I are no longer together, I don't have every detail. I'll break things down by sections for clarity, not in chronological order, but organized by people. My former family. Brother 8. Married, 3 kids, a cat, and now a few fish, too. I haven't heard from them since the divorce, but before that, I know they adopted a kitten named Bob. Brother 7. Married, 1 child. No clue what's going on there. Haven't asked, haven't been asked. Brother 6. No longer single. He's dating someone amazing. His new girlfriend actually found my story on this very forum and still loves him, despite his chaotic family background. We've met a few times over the past year. She's truly wonderful. Sure, there are occasional family tensions, but overall, they're doing great. Brother 6 was also the one who came to see me right after Ted asked for the divorce. He hugged me and said I'd always be his little sister, no matter what. That was bittersweet. Losing a husband and half of the family I once thought was mine, but at least I still have 1 brother left.
I only ever had sisters of my own, so that means a lot. Brother 5, married. He never liked me, and I finally understand why. Turns out he didn't like Ted much either. The brothers were awful to each other growing up, and apparently number 5 was the worst of the bunch. Ted often defended Ash, which put him at odds with number 5, and their tension never went away. I have zero contact with him now, and I'm keeping it that way. Brother 4, married, 1 child. He's always been level-headed. He personally made sure Ash's name is blacklisted in every local animal shelter, pet store, and vet clinic. He said that even if Ash has become a saint, he's not willing to risk another animal's safety. Honestly, knowing that makes it easier to leave that family behind. At least the cats are safe. Of course, there's always the chance that a stray might wander to him or someone might gift him a pet, but Brother 4 swore he'd do everything possible to prevent that. Brother 3, now officially married with a dog. Back when this whole saga began, they were only engaged. Their wedding was beautiful. I didn't go, even though both of them insisted that I was still part of the family. Ted wanted me there too, but I didn't want to ruin their photos or bring tension. I attended via Zoom, though, and it was genuinely lovely. Brother 2, married, 2 dogs, and a lizard. He was one of the first to step up and take action when everything went down. He apologized to me countless times for pushing us to let Ash stay with us, for everything that followed, and even for how his own actions might have impacted Ted's mental health. I accepted the first 2 apologies, but for the third, I told him that wasn't mine to forgive. He understood. He said he'd keep working on healing their family and admitted that it wasn't fair that I ended up paying the emotional price for someone else's mistakes. After the divorce, he texted to say that if I ever needed anything, he'd always be there. It was a sweet gesture. I know he's seeing a therapist too, and honestly, good for him. Brother 1, married, 3 kids. If you remember, he was the angriest about everything that happened, especially since it involved his daughter. The last time I mentioned them, they'd asked me to keep my distance and give them time. But later, his oldest daughter reached out to me herself. She's such a bright young woman. She said she missed how things were before all this chaos. I didn't ask what exactly her parents had told her, but I assume they explained the situation in some way. She's old enough now to start asking the right questions. Eventually, they decided not to press charges against Ash, but they did move across the country, thankfully for her daughter's sake. She found an incredible culinary program on the East Coast and is absolutely thriving there. Her younger daughter, from what I've heard from Ted's mother-in-law and sister-in-law, is also doing fine. She barely interacted with Ash outside of holidays. Apparently, the reason he fixated on her photos wasn't personal. She just looks exactly like their father, and combined with the fact that she's a girl, it triggered him. I'll explain that part later. She's still seeing a therapist, but hates every minute of it, claiming it has nothing to do with her. She's mostly angry about the move and leaving her friends behind. Anyway, that family seems to be safe and rebuilding. They're slowly settling into life on the East Coast. The parents still keep their distance from me, which I completely understand. They're not fans of the colder weather, but I told their eldest daughter she's always welcome to visit me. Brother 1's wife is kind enough to allow it. As for Brother 1 himself, we haven't spoken since. All communication goes through his wife and kids.
I was the first among my sisters to get married, and since Ted's family hadn't had a big celebration in years, his older brothers were much older, everyone was thrilled. I never regretted marrying Ted for a single second, but honestly, I could have done without the grand wedding. Sometimes I wish we had just gone to the courthouse alone or run off to Vegas to be married by Elvis. I'm not even sure people still do that, but it sounds a lot cooler than a 200-guest circus. I remember when we finally agreed to the big wedding, and my mother-in-law was absolutely over the moon. For the first time, it felt like she saw me as more than just another daughter-in-law added to the pile. It might sound silly, but that feeling,
being accepted into the family, actually meant something to me, even if it came at the price of a massive wedding. I tried to include her in everything. With 10 sons, she probably never got many chances to help plan girly things. At first she was sweet to me, maybe just to get her way, and I was too naive to see it. I stayed the golden daughter-in-law for a while after the wedding, probably up until another grandchild was born. Then I was relieved to step back and return to a more comfortable distance. Being her favorite was exhausting. It came with too many expectations. It's wild to think how badly I once wanted her to love me, and how now I'd give anything for her to forget I even exist. After Ash was sent to a psychiatric clinic, my mother-in-law did everything she could to destroy me. I cut contact with her and most of the family for a while, eventually rebuilding ties with a few of them, but not with her. I've only seen her once since then, when she came to pack up Ash's apartment. She deliberately came to my parents' house just to scream at me. It was horrible and perfectly timed. My parents were both at work, my sisters too. I opened the door, and there she was. No greetings, no pretending. She unloaded everything at once, every imaginary slight, every accusation. She called me a worthless wife, said she hoped the divorce would crush me, that she'd make sure her son took everything from me, that she wouldn't rest until I was homeless. And the worst thing she said, the one line that burned itself into my mind, was that she was grateful I was barren, because she couldn't stand the thought of me tainting their blood. Ted and I never actively tried for children, but we never prevented it either. We just figured if it happens, it happens. It never did. And now I can't help but wonder if it makes me a terrible person that part of me feels grateful for that. Our neighbors called the police that day. They escorted her out. That's how my sister found me, sitting on the floor, holding our cat, shaking. She called Ted, and I think he heard the details from his 5th brother, the one who must have driven her there. I didn't see him myself. We haven't spoken since. I don't know what Ted told her or what she told him. I only know that she left me alone after that, and for that, I'm thankful. Ted is probably the most decent ex-husband in the universe. I could tell 1,000 stories about him. It's strange to be without him now, but I try to respect his choices. When he asked for a divorce, he said, "I can't be with you anymore. I'll never forgive myself for what I put you through. I don't want to keep exposing you to my family's madness." At the time, I was furious. He was making decisions for me without asking what I wanted. But after a lot of therapy, I realized he wasn't doing it for me at all. He was doing it for himself, to ease his guilt, or maybe to convince himself that ending things was some kind of mercy. Maybe being apart helped him pretend none of it happened. Or maybe he genuinely thought he was protecting me. But it hurt because I always saw us as a team, not me versus him, us, and his decision destroyed that team completely. Some days I wake up hating him. Other days I just stare at my phone debating whether to call. Sometimes I do, and he always answers, always kind, always calm, reminding me that he's still around. We sold the house, and of course he moved out. For a while he went to the West Coast to deal with family matters during the divorce, then came back. His work was here, and he loved it. I can't tell if I'm glad he's still in the same city or I hate him for ruining it. Every street, every cafe, every corner has memories of him. Maybe I'm the one who should leave and start fresh, somewhere no one knows my past. As for Ash, when he was first sent to a psychiatric facility after the fight with his brothers, numbers 3, 4, and 8, the same ones who came at the beginning to help, he stayed there for several weeks. He kept begging to see Ted, but Ted never went. He did, however, send him a letter. At first, I didn't want to know what it said, but later I asked. Ted told me he wrote, "Stop asking for visits, start focusing on yourself and your life. Stop putting yourself above your own needs." A few weeks later, brother number 3 arranged for Ash to be transferred to the West Coast. I don't know whether they placed him in another facility or left him under family care. His mother, along with brothers 5 and 7, came to pack his things and move him officially. Afterward, Ash lived with his mother, and brother number 2 was put in charge of making sure he continued treatment, and I'm pretty sure he still does. When Ted went west to deal with family stuff, it was rough for him. He met with some of his brothers, maybe not all, but definitely the ones most involved. According to Ted, brother number 3 shared some insights from Ash's doctors. They said Ash had suffered a psychotic episode and remained in treatment afterward. I never heard the full diagnosis, but Ted said the therapists had gone deep into their childhood, their family dynamics, and especially how Ted's overprotectiveness had fostered an unhealthy attachment. When Ted told me all this, he sounded detached, like he was talking about strangers. Maybe that's how he copes. Many of you asked what could have happened to Ash to make him the way he was. Here's part of it. I won't say which brothers did what. You can fill in those blanks yourself, but yes, most of your guesses were disturbingly close to the truth. Beyond the usual bullying, beatings, humiliation, mockery, there were far worse things. They locked him in closets, stole his clothes, left him outside overnight, blocked all the bathrooms so he'd wet himself. They threatened him with weapons, abandoned him miles from home and made him walk back in any weather. They put him in diapers, tied him up, dragged him around on ATVs, poured water on him and left him freezing. They even sprinkled itching powder in his underwear. It's horrifying, isn't it? I know siblings fight, but this was beyond cruelty. What could he possibly have done to deserve that? It doesn't excuse what Ash later became, but it explains a lot, especially his deep resentment toward women. In his mind, women were weak, useless. His mother hadn't protected him, so how could any woman? And his brothers had kept him isolated from any girl who showed him interest. That's how his twisted attachment to Ted formed. Ted was the only one who ever defended him, and we all know how that ended. Now Ash is somewhere out west. I hope he stays there. I kept 2 pairs of shoes that Ash had ruined with his disgusting golden shower. Everything else I threw away. One pair was the first thing I ever bought with money from my first internship. They symbolized independence to me. Losing my job, my home, my peace, it all felt like those shoes had lost their meaning. But now as I rebuild my life piece by piece, new home, new job, small steps, I look at them differently. I haven't worn them since that day. But maybe someday I will again, when I finally feel whole. Happy holidays, everyone. I don't know what mine will look like this year, but I truly hope yours are filled with light and peace.
Update 5. It's been a long time since I last came here. I'll try to keep this one short. Some people messaged me saying my updates were too long or that I took forever to get to the point. If that bothers you, feel free to skip this. My life isn't meant to be your entertainment. I'm only writing because I've received an incredible amount of kindness and support from people asking how I've been and wanting to know what's new. So if this seems too long, stop reading any time. My story won't change your life anyway, except maybe as something to pass the time. The last time I wrote was before the holidays, and honestly, my plans for them were pretty terrible. I swore I wouldn't sit around wallowing in self-pity, but guess how that went? Yeah, exactly that. I just didn't have the strength to celebrate. My family absolutely loves Christmas. The lights, the laughter, the chaos. I didn't want to bring my mood into it, so I told my dad I'd be spending the day with a friend who'd recently lost her husband. She actually went to visit his parents, and I stayed home with my cat watching movies. Ted called me on Christmas Day, and for the first time, I didn't answer with, "Are you proud of me?" I know a lot of people here will be happy about that. So many of you told me to cut all contact completely. But please understand, I couldn't just erase someone who had been my best friend for 10 years. Later, he texted to ask if I was okay. He said he saw some photos of my sister on Facebook and noticed I wasn't in any of them. I should probably ask my sisters to block him. He adores them, and they still care about him too. Before everything went downhill, Ted was honestly a wonderful person. Even now, he's trying his best. Maybe I'm biased, but he's not the monster people imagine. He's going through something deeply traumatic, too. Facing the truth about what his family did isn't easy. I stared at his message for hours, trying to decide what to write back, and ended up not answering at all. I wasn't doing well, but he's still the one who knows me better than anyone. Our 10 years together weren't wasted. We didn't split because we stopped loving each other. We split because it was what we both needed. I had my family and all of you to lean on. Ted didn't. Some of his brothers hate him even more now. He lost his best friend, his little brother, his wife, and in a way, even his mother. It's easy to paint him as the villain, the one who hurt me. But you've only heard my side. He's still human. He made mistakes, but he's not evil. And I don't think he'll ever see our divorce as one of those mistakes. Eventually, I just replied something like, "Wasn't in the mood to celebrate, stayed home, Merry Christmas." He must have sensed something was wrong because he showed up. He knows the area where I live and the park I love walking in. He asked if we could meet, and I agreed. Yeah, I know, not exactly a boundary win, but baby steps, right? We talked for hours. I didn't realize he'd spent Christmas alone, too. Maybe if I had, I would have invited him over or gone to my parents with him. Many of you insisted that cutting him off completely was the healthiest option, but I don't agree. Maybe I'll change my mind later, but right now, I think we still need each other a little. Every day I feel like I need him less, but that day I really did. And sometimes he still needs me too. I want to believe we can stay friends, though deep down I know that probably won't last. Someday he'll have a new partner, and I doubt she'll be thrilled about me. Or maybe we'll just drift apart naturally, or I'll finally get angry enough to hate him. But right now, he helps me in ways no one else can. It might sound silly, but I don't think anyone else truly understands who I am now. I'm not the same woman I was before all this, not even the same as a year ago. What happened with his family changed us both. Not everyone understands why I can't calmly take my kids to the bathroom anymore, or why I had to leave work early when my boss gave me sunflowers on Women's Day. Ted does. He's barely in contact with his family now, just minimal messages with brother number 4 and brother number 6. So I don't have much to update about Ash or the others. Brother 6 says he's sad Ted is pulled away from him too, since he's also cut off most of the family. But he understands and says he'll be there when Ted's ready. A lot of people told me what I used to call bullying was actually abuse, and they're right. That word matters. For too long, I downplayed it, brushed it off as boys being boys, or that's just how brothers are. I thought it was normal. By minimizing it, I became part of the problem, the same problem that eventually broke everything. If any of us, the wives or I, had known the real extent of what happened in their childhood, so many choices would have been different. Of course, much of the blame lies with my ex-mother-in-law, but I think everyone's learned their lesson now. I'm not ready to date again. I need to learn how to be alone. Ted and I had been together since college. It's been so long that I'm not even sure I remember how to go on a first date anymore. But hey, that's what Google's for. Being alone took some getting used to. I don't even want to call it loneliness. Sometimes it's peaceful. You finish your book and the apartment is quiet. Not in a sad way, just calm. I've learned a lot. I realized how often I relied on others for things I could have done myself. I changed a tire for the first time, terrified because the blowout happened on the highway, but I did it. I learned plants have different needs after killing a few. Now I've got a little basil plant that's thriving. I discovered I actually don't like action movies. Too fast, too loud. I learned how to cook shrimp. Ted couldn't eat them because of his allergy, so I never made them before. Tip: don't forget to remove the vein. There are things I miss without him, though.
like having someone to drive me to the ER when I sliced my hand cutting carrots. By the way, hospitals really should have valet service. Or sitting alone at the vet's office when my cat got sick. Or having no one to hold me on the anniversary of my childhood friend's death. Oh, and I absolutely hate mopping floors, but now that's my job. That's about it. I haven't seen Ted since Christmas, but we text occasionally and have had a couple of phone calls. We're learning how to be apart without completely cutting off the support we still give each other. We're both still healing. But now, for the first time, I can honestly say, I see the light. Before, I was just existing day by day. His birthday is coming up soon. I don't think I'll go, but I'll make sure friends check on him so he's not alone. I think this is the right moment for a final update, a quiet ending with a bit of hope for the future. Though, who knows? Maybe one day I'll surprise you with another post titled, Another Year Later. For now, I can finally say it's going to be okay.
Update 6. Hello, dear readers. How are you all doing? Almost a full year has flown by. We've all grown a little older, and hopefully a little wiser, too. It still amazes me that after all this time, there are people who continue to follow my story, sending kind words and thoughtful messages. For my haters and those who don't enjoy my long monologues, here's your short version. I bought a robot mop, my basil plant died, life seemed to finally get better, my ex-husband tried to hurt himself, and now I'm back living with my parents. Following some advice from commenters, I first bought a steam mop. It helped, sure, but I still had to deal with wet floors. And stepping into damp socks has always been one of my biggest annoyances. Then, following other advice, I got a robot mop. I already had a robot vacuum, but had no idea mopping versions even existed. It's perfect. I love it. I set it up before leaving the house, and when I come back, everything's clean and dry. Best feeling ever. My poor little basil plant didn't make it. Totally my fault. I moved it from the kitchen to get more sunlight, and it just couldn't handle the change. I used the last leaves in a pasta salad. Arugula, cherry tomatoes, mozzarella balls, olive oil, salt, and basil. Simple and delicious. Someone gave me miniature roses afterward. I killed those too within a couple of months, and finally accepted that living plants and I are not compatible. Life sucks, and then you die. One of my sisters always loved that saying. She sees it as a reminder not to dwell on the bad because life is short. But to me, right now, it sounds painfully literal. I went on a date recently. A friend introduced me to one of his coworkers. It was awkward. I couldn't tell if I'd always been that socially clumsy, or if first dates are just meant to be weird, or if we simply didn't click. The whole dinner, I had this overwhelming fight or flight feeling. He was nice, though. Maybe dinner was too formal. People probably do coffee dates these days, and that might have been easier. Or maybe I'm just not ready yet. My new job, well, not so new anymore, is wonderful. My boss no longer gives me flowers. I'm not sure if he figured it out himself or someone told him about last year, but when everyone else gets bouquets, I get lamps. Sounds odd, but I love lamps and anything that glows. Over the past year, he's given me a cat-shaped nightlight, a string of fairy lights, and a Himalayan salt lamp. He's a genuinely kind person, and I appreciate his thoughtfulness so much. My coworkers are amazing, and for the first time, I feel like my work actually has meaning. I used to have 2 jobs, one for the soul and one for the bills. Now I have one that gives me both, and that feels almost miraculous. Sometimes I regret wasting so many years in places that drained me. So this feels like a win. I know I'm rambling again. It's just hard to know where to start or what's safe to share. And to be honest, it's a bit unsettling knowing some people are still quietly watching me through this account. I don't really care, but it's a strange feeling, like being observed from afar. Ash was a victim of severe abuse growing up. Everyone was shocked when the truth came out, mostly because he'd always kept up the image of being perfectly fine. Prestigious engineering degree, solid career, a stable life after college. It all started unraveling during the pandemic lockdowns. I thought about it a lot. Would he have broken down if the pandemic hadn't happened? Or would something else have triggered it? Would someone else have opened that closet full of skeletons? The endless what-ifs are exhausting. I've imagined dozens of alternate realities, some happy, some tragic. I know it's unhealthy to dwell on it, but sometimes I envy those imaginary versions of life where things turned out differently. And no, Ted didn't die, though even typing that feels surreal. He's still here, more or less okay. It took a lot of therapy sessions for me to accept that what happened wasn't my fault. I was just caught in the middle. What Ash became was the result of years of abuse and neglect from his family. Sooner or later, it would have surfaced with or without me. I like to believe someone else might have eventually convinced him to see a real therapist who could have helped him. But we'll never know. The only thing I'm truly grateful for is that the breaking point involved me and not Brother One's daughter. The consequences would have been far more horrific otherwise. After the divorce, I still kept light contact with Brother Six, but after advice from many of you, and from people in my life, I decided to distance myself. A few months later, he reached out asking if I'd heard from Ted. I said no. He told me something serious had happened in the family. No details, and I didn't ask. He said everyone had been trying to reach Ted but couldn't. He was worried and said he was planning to come to town to check on him. Asked me to let him know if Ted contacted me. I knew Ted had been deliberately keeping his family at a distance, including Brother Six, so it didn't surprise me much. Still, Ted would never ignore a genuine family emergency. I texted him that his brother had reached out, trying to find him. He read it, but didn't reply. At that point, we were already pretty distant, just like many of you had advised, so his silence didn't alarm me too much. A couple of weeks later, Brother Six messaged again. He was in town and wanted to meet. I agreed. I'd missed him. I suggested a new restaurant I thought he'd love, but he said just coffee. That was strange. He's a total foodie and never turns down a chance to try new places. But I figured he was short on time and wanted to focus on Ted. We met in my favorite park, and he looked awful. I instinctively stepped back. That gut feeling when you know bad news is coming. I honestly thought he was going to say Ash is back, but instead he looked completely defeated. He told me something else had surfaced in the family. I didn't ask what. I don't care anymore. Sorry to disappoint those hoping for spicy details. I know that's what draws half of you here. Anyway, when he went to Ted's place, he found him in terrible shape. Ted had never been much of a drinker, only on holidays, socially, but that morning, at 10 a.m. on a Saturday, he was completely wasted. His brother stayed with him, sobered him up, and the next day told him about the family matter. He went back to his hotel to grab his things, and when he returned to Ted's apartment, he found him unconscious. He called an ambulance. Ted was taken to the hospital and stayed there for a while. I don't know if something new had happened or if the weight of the last 2 years finally broke him, but it looked like he'd been living in self-destruction mode for a long time. My therapist said it makes sense, that maybe it even explains why he chose to end our marriage. Maybe I'm just looking for a reason, but knowing Ted, it fits. He's always been the protector type, even as a kid, shielding Ash. He's the kind of person who makes sure no one spikes a girl's drink at a bar or checks on a child standing alone on the street. He has controlling tendencies, usually born from anxiety. He's a meticulous planner, but when things go off script, it shakes him. He's strict, but incredibly dependable. I always loved that about him. During our final talks before the divorce, he kept apologizing over and over for not protecting me, for putting me in harm's way. Even when I told him it wasn't his fault, I don't think he ever believed me. He had to face a painful truth. His family wasn't what he thought. He realized he'd helped silence things, downplay things, excuse things.
He had to confront how horrifying their childhood really was and what monsters some of his brothers became. It crushed him. He was fighting trauma, guilt, helplessness. Eventually, Ted checked himself into a rehabilitation center. He didn't let me visit, but sent letters. They're too personal to share here, but reading them were emotional. The first few were full of apologies for worrying me, for everything. Then came longer, scattered ones, and some truly beautiful. I could see him slowly shifting from overly polite and self-blaming to someone closer to the man I'd once loved. Watching him begin to finally understand what I'd been trying to tell him for years felt like witnessing a kind of catharsis. He said writing helped him process, and I believe it. That's why I still write these updates. Why letters to me, though, instead of a journal? I don't know, but I'm not complaining. There was one letter where he was just angry, furious at everyone and everything. And weirdly, that one made me the happiest. It meant the fire was coming back. He even called me a nickname he hadn't used since before our wedding, and honestly, it infuriated me.
It wasn't anything serious. He was just reminiscing about that trip we once took to visit friends, a couple who ended up fighting the entire time. They argued so badly that they wanted to leave halfway through the vacation. Everything had already been paid for, but they simply couldn't stay together anymore. So we split up. The guys and the girls did everything separately. Ted was miserable the whole trip. Later, he sent me a message that said something like, "I still haven't forgiven Alice for Venice. You were supposed to be the one in that damn gondola with me, Peaches, not Steve." The nickname itself didn't bother me, but reading it brought back that old ache, the feeling of loss, the memories of what we'd lost. Against his earlier wishes, I replied to the message. That one answer led to us talking again. He wasn't upset that I broke his no replies rule. Maybe he had wanted that all along. We ended up exchanging letters for several weeks, and honestly, it was nice. We never mentioned Ash or his family, not once. Maybe it just never came up, or maybe he was avoiding the topic on purpose. Either way, it felt so good to talk to him again, like we used to. When we first met, we used to chat through Facebook Messenger, and this whole exchange brought me right back to those early days. Silly as it sounds, I still love him. I still miss him. These letters made me feel like I'd gotten my best friend back, even if he's no longer my husband. Ted's back in his own place now. For a while, his brother, number 3, and his wife stayed with him, along with their dog, while Ted recovered. Thanks to remote work, that worked out fine. He's on antidepressants now, has a lot of people supporting him, and honestly, he's doing so much better. He stopped pushing everyone away, but still keeps healthy boundaries, and that's such a good thing. He talks to brothers 3, 4, and 6 again. They were always the closest to him, besides Ash. He still doesn't talk to the rest of the family, though, which is a little sad, especially because I know he loved some of his nieces and nephews deeply. I think he misses them, but keeping his distance is probably the right choice. Funny enough, brother number 6 also doesn't talk to most of the family anymore. He's always been more withdrawn, a bit like Ted and Ash. Maybe he understood more than the others. After everything that happened, he grew closer to brothers 3 and 4. Another small silver lining, I suppose. Ted and I have met up a few times, sometimes at group events, sometimes just to talk. I can truly see the difference in him. He's gained back some weight, his hair looks healthy again, and he doesn't slump his shoulders anymore. Just last week, he finally returned to work after being on medical leave, and I can tell it's given him back his sense of purpose. He was never the type to sit still, so that downtime must have been torture for him. We went to an animal shelter together recently. He adopted an older cat named Socks, probably because of its white paws. Sweet cat, but missing a bunch of teeth. Ted's been trying to rename him Macbeth, but the cat clearly isn't having it. To be fair, Socks doesn't really respond to Socks either, so maybe there's still hope. As for me, I'm still on the East Coast, and 2022 hit us hard. 2 hurricanes slammed into our city, and my apartment got flooded. Whenever a state of emergency is declared, Dad always tells us to come home. So the cat and I were safe, but it was still a nightmare. I don't know if it was the universe sending a message, but remember those 2 pairs of shoes I kept? They were both completely ruined. I tried everything to save them, even spoke with restoration specialists, but they were beyond repair. And it wasn't just them. Half my belongings had to be thrown away, including so many sentimental things. You guys know how attached I am to shoes, even when they've practically turned into biohazards. My poor apartment took a beating. We had to rip out the floors. Mold had already started growing underneath by the time we could even get inside. Most of my furniture was destroyed, all my electronics, even my poor little robot mop. I did have sandbags, but they didn't help much. Insurance covered some of it, but definitely not everything. Filing those claims was its own special kind of hell. In the end, it made more sense to renovate and sell the apartment. I've always hated moving, but this time it hit me harder than usual. Maybe because I had so little to pack. I filled just a few boxes. Even when I went to college, I took more with me. So yeah, I'm back living with my parents. It's both annoying and comforting. The house feels emptier now. My youngest sister recently left for college, but at least I have the cats. And honestly, cats make great company. Right now, I'm finalizing the purchase of a new condo, in a high-rise this time just to avoid another flood. I'll miss the park near my old place, but the new neighborhood is great. Everything's close by, and I could even bike to work if I ever learn how to ride one. Why can't I? Because Dad was overprotective and convinced we'd all die if we got on a bike as kids. I don't know if it's too late to learn now, but I'm ready to swallow my pride and start with training wheels if I have to. That's where things stand right now. I'm focusing on work and spending more time with my parents. I've planned a trip for March, my first solo trip ever. I'm terrified. Dad used to be the planner, and I have no idea if I'm doing it right. But maybe that's the point, to figure it out myself. I'm even taking language classes for the country I'm visiting, so we'll see how that goes. There's something else I wanted to share, the real reason for this update. Remember how brother number 6 met with me back then to talk about Ted? I was terrified he'd tell me Ash was back. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. But while Ted was still in treatment, a letter arrived at my parents' house. From Ash. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel fear. Maybe it's because I'd been exchanging letters with Ted, or maybe I just finally healed a bit. My therapist probably deserves a raise. I even offered, but he laughed and said that's not how therapy works. Anyway, I read the letter. Ash apologized. He admitted to a lot of things he'd done, small acts of aggression, manipulative behavior, things I hadn't even recognized for what they were back then. He didn't try to justify himself, just owned it. He also confessed to a few things I hadn't known about, some of which a few of you actually guessed. The letter was messy, desperate, but I understood why. He apologized for hurting Ted, said he probably understood Ted's pain better than anyone else, that he knew he'd caused irreparable damage and could never be part of Ted's life again. He said that even if he couldn't make amends directly, maybe acknowledging his mistakes and apologizing to me was his way of honoring Ted indirectly, of trying to atone even a little. One line really stuck with me. I'm sorry I ruined your marriage, but I don't think I ruined your life. Ted wouldn't have chosen you if you weren't strong. He thanked me for trying, and I really did try in the beginning. I wanted to stay friends with him, but after the incident with the urine, that became impossible. He admitted he'd given up on the idea that anyone but Ted would fight for him, and apologized for never giving me a chance. He said he envied the happiness I brought Ted, a happiness he himself couldn't give, and now regrets that his actions cost Ted that joy. I think writing the letter was his way of easing his guilt, acknowledging what he'd done to his beloved brother, and maybe respecting Ted's boundaries in the only way he knew how. Of course, he didn't respect mine. I never told Ted about the letter, and I don't think I ever will. I told brother number 6, though. He was furious at first, but later calmed down and said it was my choice.
He said the letter wouldn't really do any harm, but it wouldn't help either. If I ever do decide to show it to Ted, it should be when he's in a stable place, maybe even in therapy, with professional support. Christmas came again, and this time I spent it with my family. My sisters are amazing. Each gave me a pair of shoes representing milestones in my life, plus one empty box for the pair all buy to mark a new beginning. It was the most thoughtful, emotional gift I've ever received. I cried through most of Christmas morning. On New Year's Eve, I saw Ted again. We were both invited to a mutual friend's party. We didn't plan to spend time together, but somehow kept ending up in the same group, laughing together. When midnight hit, I was sitting toward the back, away from the couples, and he came over, sat next to me, and rested his head on my shoulder. We just sat there in peaceful silence while everyone else celebrated. It felt so good, such a relief, to have my friend back. I still love him. I probably always will. I tried keeping my distance, tried not talking to him, even slept with someone else hoping it'd help me move on, but it didn't. Maybe he's my soulmate and we'll always be drawn back to each other. Or maybe it's just habit, comfort built over so many years. I don't know. But I can't stop loving him. I love the man he used to be. I love the man he is now. And honestly, I'll love whoever he becomes tomorrow and the day after that. I won't give up on him, even if I have to give up on us. I'd rather have him in my life as a friend than lose him completely. I'm always happier when he's around. I deserve to be happy, and he makes me happy. Maybe that's wrong, maybe it's foolish, but it's the truth. Everyone keeps saying that letting go was the right thing, that he did me a favor by ending things. But I miss him. Maybe that makes me stupid, but if it does, I'll gladly be a happy fool. If he ever asks me to step back, I will. But for now, I just want to live in this moment.
My husband secretly booked business class tickets for himself and his mother for our honeymoon, leaving me with a seat in economy class. So I exposed him right there in the airport lobby, in front of everyone. I'm 32 and my husband Van is 36. We got married recently. We had been together for 4 years and engaged for 8 months. I met him when I was 29. At the time, I worked as a bar manager, and he used to come in regularly as a customer. We started talking, and eventually he asked me out. I turned him down at first, but he kept coming back to the bar, always finding excuses to chat with me. My coworkers joked that it was kind of sweet. Eventually, I decided to give him a chance, and from there, everything took off. Van is, in many ways, wonderful. He's affectionate, kind, emotionally mature, financially independent, and always plans our dates. The only issue I ever had was his mother, Naomi. Before anyone judges me, I want to explain. When I first met her, I actually liked her. Van was 13 when his parents divorced. His father, Matt, cheated on Naomi with a coworker. Naomi was completely devastated. They had been together since college, and she believed they would grow old together. Matt begged for forgiveness, saying he had never been with anyone else and that this was a stupid mistake caused by losing his head. But Naomi refused to forgive him and filed for divorce. What Matt did was awful, but Van was too young to fully understand what was happening. He was just heartbroken watching his family fall apart. He lived with his mother during the week to stay close to school and spent weekends with his father. Despite his mistake, Matt was a good father to Van. He supported him, attended every school event and sports game, showed up for parent-teacher meetings, and most importantly, allowed Van to be himself. Naomi, on the other hand, became extremely strict after the divorce. Van believes her behavior changed because of the betrayal. She became obsessively controlling. According to Van, he wasn't allowed to stay out late with friends, date girls, go on school trips or picnics, be near lakes or pools, sleep over at friends' houses. When he told me about these rules, they sounded ridiculous. Van explained that his mother justified everything by saying she was lonely without him and just wanted to protect him from the world. Unsurprisingly, Van quickly realized he felt much more comfortable living with his father.
Matt's rules were simple. Don't stay out too late, and always share your location when going out with friends in case of emergencies. When school trips came up, Naomi would forbid Van from going, but Matt would sign the permission forms and encourage him to participate. This caused massive fights between Naomi and Matt, with Naomi threatening legal action. If Van wanted to hang out with friends, Naomi would say no, so he waited for weekends at his dad's place to finally have some freedom. As a teenager, he grew to hate living with his mother. They argued constantly. She criticized his clothes, his hair, and his friends. He spent most weekdays locked in his room, counting down the days until Friday, when he could escape to his dad's house. When Van was 17, Matt introduced him to his new partner, Heather. Heather is a kind woman who treated Van like her own son. She struggled with infertility and had accepted that she would never have children. Meeting Matt and learning he had a son was something she genuinely welcomed. Van adored her. She became a second mother to him. For Naomi, this was unacceptable. She couldn't tolerate another woman in her son's life. She caused endless scandals and tried to poison Van against Heather, claiming that Matt must have cheated with her during the marriage, which wasn't true. Heather entered Matt's life long after the divorce. Naomi refused to accept this reality and began making Matt's life difficult, even preventing him from seeing his son. When weekends came, Naomi would say Van couldn't go to his father because Heather was some unknown woman and she wouldn't allow her son to stay with strangers. The conflicts became uglier and uglier. When Van turned 18, he was accepted into 2 universities. Naomi pressured him to choose the one closest to her home so she could visit him every week. Van didn't like that university. It lacked proper programs in his field. He discussed it honestly with his father. Matt told him he should choose what was best for himself, regardless of Naomi's wishes, but Van was terrified of upsetting her. In the end, he chose the university farther away. Naomi exploded. She screamed that he was abandoning her, that all men were the same. She threatened to kick him out and said she wouldn't pay for his education unless he did what she wanted. Van called his father, and Matt immediately came to help him pack and move out. That was the last day Van lived with his mother.
Just to clarify, being someone's +1 meant that Van was expected to take his mother as his guest to various events, for example, company parties or work functions. From what I later understood, even when we traveled, she demanded that he constantly share his location, claiming it helped her sleep peacefully at night. All of this made me deeply uncomfortable. I could clearly see Van being torn apart between wanting a normal adult life and feeling obligated to take care of his emotionally unstable mother. He didn't want to meet all her demands, but he was terrified that she might do something extreme again. Unlike his mother, his father Matt was calm, grounded, and emotionally healthy. I had met Matt and his wife Heather many times, and they were always warm and welcoming. They never asked intrusive questions. Matt showed genuine interest in my life without ever trying to belittle me. I saw many of Matt's best qualities reflected in Van. That's probably why I stayed. I knew Van was more than the damage his mother had caused him. I understood that he needed therapy, and I gently encouraged him to seek it, but he always insisted that he was fine. When Van proposed to me, completely out of the blue, it became one of the happiest days of my life. He surprised me by bringing my parents and my best friend into town so they could be part of the moment. Matt and Heather were there too, congratulating us wholeheartedly. The only person missing was Naomi. Van said she wasn't feeling well. Honestly, I was relieved. I didn't want her saying something inappropriate in front of my parents. I knew they would instantly dislike her if she did. We were having a wonderful time when Van suddenly received a call from the hospital. His mother had fallen down the stairs. We all rushed there, but Naomi refused to see me or anyone else. She demanded that only Van be allowed into her room, so we waited outside. I found that strange. We were all there out of concern, but it didn't feel appropriate to say anything at the time. When Van came out, he said she would be fine.
According to the doctor, she had a fracture and needed to stay overnight. Naomi wanted Van to stay with her. Matt immediately offered to stay instead, pointing out that she would be sleeping anyway and that Van should take me home. But Van refused. He said his mother wouldn't like that and he didn't want to upset her further. So we all went home. My parents and my friend helped me clean up afterward. Van booked them hotel rooms for the night, but they chose to stay with me instead. I think they could see how sad I was, that I wouldn't be spending the night with my fiancé on the very day he proposed. That should have been my first warning sign that things were only going to get worse. Wedding planning quickly turned into what Naomi wants. She interfered with my wedding dress, chose the flower girl, commented on Van's suit, controlled the guest list, the venue, almost every single detail. Van and I have long planned our honeymoon in Hawaii, but Naomi insisted that flying that far was unacceptable and that somewhere closer would be much better. That was when I finally tried to set a boundary. I told her calmly but firmly, no. Naomi was shocked and said it was disrespectful to speak to her that way. I replied honestly that the honeymoon was for Van and me, and the decision was ours. She immediately burst into tears, telling Van that I was excluding her, ignoring her, and pushing her out of his life. She accused me of trying to steal her son, which was absurd. I reminded her that I had already accepted her choice of officiant, venue, cake, and even the dresses for my bridesmaids. I had tried to accommodate her wishes wherever possible, but I would not allow her to dictate where we went on our honeymoon. Van was caught in the middle. He tried to talk to her, but she framed herself as a martyr, a mother sacrificing everything for her son. Later, I even sent her an apologetic message, knowing how much she meant to Van. Her reply chilled me. She said no woman would ever take her son away from her, and that I should know my place. I immediately showed the message to Van. He called his mother to confront her, but she accused me of trying to drive a wedge between them and insisted that he should always love and believe her more than me. I was deeply hurt. After the call, I told Van exactly how it made me feel. To his credit, he agreed. He reassured me that we would stick to our plan and go to Hawaii. I was relieved. It felt like Van was finally starting to set boundaries. I believed we could enjoy our honeymoon far away from her controlling presence. The wedding itself went smoothly, without major incidents. However, during the reception, my mother-in-law somehow managed to give a speech entirely about herself, emphasizing how much she had sacrificed in her life. It felt like a quiet attempt to reclaim attention even on our day. Still, I chose to focus on the positives. My parents, Matt, Heather, and our guests had a great time. We danced all night. I went to bed excited, knowing we were leaving for Hawaii the next day. On the morning of our honeymoon, I woke up in an amazing mood. Van and I headed to the airport, and I felt genuinely happy until we arrived. That's when I discovered that Van had booked himself a business class seat and me an economy seat. I was stunned. I would have happily paid for business class myself. Van had insisted on handling the travel arrangements, so I assumed we would be sitting together. When I asked him what was going on, he said he had found a great deal and upgraded his ticket, but there were no business class seats left for me. It didn't sit right with me. He wouldn't look me in the eye. He brushed it off, saying it wasn't a big deal, just a few hours. I told him that if it really didn't matter, then he could sit in economy while I took business class. He snapped. He accused me of being overly sensitive and said we'd see each other after landing. When I asked where he was going, he said he was heading to the business lounge. I was completely confused and hurt. I tried calling him, but he ignored every call. My suspicion grew stronger. Something felt very wrong. Then my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. She never called me directly unless she couldn't reach Van. I answered, intending to tell her that Van would call her back soon. Instead, she started asking where exactly I was sitting in the airport, which cafe, which lounge. Already overwhelmed, I finally asked her what she wanted. After a brief pause, she mockingly told me not to lose my composure because she was also flying with us on our honeymoon. I completely lost it. I shouted, demanding to know what kind of sick joke this was. Naomi calmly explained that she wanted to stay close to her son and didn't want him flying so far away, so she had convinced him to bring her along. I hung up, furious, and marched straight to the business lounge. Security didn't want to let me in, but I told them my husband was inside and that I urgently needed to speak to him about his mother. After a long argument, they finally let me through, and that's when I saw Van, sitting comfortably, scrolling through his phone.
So his phone had been in his hands the entire time. He had been deliberately ignoring my calls. I walked up to him and he looked up, clearly shocked to see me there with security. He asked what was going on, but I didn't waste time. I asked him directly if it was true that his mother was flying with us on our honeymoon. Van froze. I asked if that was the real reason he'd bought me a separate ticket, so I wouldn't find out that he was planning to spend our honeymoon with his mommy. His face turned bright red. People around us started staring. Even the security guard seemed invested in the scene. That was when my mother-in-law walked into the lounge, scanning the room for Van. When she saw us, she stopped dead in her tracks. I told Van that she herself had told me everything. That's when he started stumbling through excuses. He said that originally he had booked economy tickets for just the two of us, but Naomi had cried and begged him, and in an attempt to keep everyone happy, he brought separate tickets and tried to hide it from me. He claimed he had booked her a completely different hotel and that she wouldn't bother us. Naomi stepped in, as she always did. She said I should be grateful that her son loved her so much, and that it was no big deal if she came along. After all, she had never been so far away from her boy before. I was shaking with rage. If we hadn't been in an airport, I would have lost it completely. Instead, I raised my voice and told my husband that I was ashamed to be married to a child who couldn't go anywhere without his mother. I said he looked more like her husband than her son. Van whispered that I was embarrassing him in front of respectable people and that we could talk about it after landing. I laughed in his face. I told him to enjoy his honeymoon with his mommy because I was done. Both of them stared at me in shock as I walked away. I tore my tickets in half and called a taxi home. Van ended up not flying either. He came home later and started yelling at me, saying I had no right to speak to me like that and that he was only trying to do the right thing. He said his mother flew alone because she didn't want to lose her ticket. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried. I couldn't even look at him. All of this happened yesterday, and ever since then I felt like I'm in a fog. I know with painful clarity that our marriage is over. He hasn't apologized. He barely speaks to me. And it hurts. Leaving a marriage is a massive step, especially when, just 3 days ago, I believed I would spend my entire life with him. That's why I came here. I needed to know if I was wrong for walking away after my husband tried to bring his mother on our honeymoon. Update 1. I'm overwhelmed by the support I received, hundreds of comments and private messages. When I wrote my post, I never expected so many strangers to care. After reading everything, I agree with those who said I needed to have one final, honest conversation with my husband. If he continues to side with his mother, I will have no choice but to end this marriage. I can't spend my entire life fighting this. Naomi clearly doesn't care about us, considering she still flew to Hawaii alone, fully aware that all of this chaos was caused by her. I'll update after we talk. Update 2. A month has passed since my last update, and a lot has happened. After the airport incident, I made a decision. The situation was unbearable, and I couldn't live in limbo without a real conversation. I packed my things and waited for Van to come home from work. That conversation would either save our marriage or destroy it. When Van walked in and saw me waiting, I saw surprise and fear flash across his face.
I asked him to sit down and handed him a glass of water. The tension in the room was almost suffocating. We hadn't spoken since the incident because he still believed I owed him an apology. I took a deep breath and told him everything, how his mother had made me feel all this time. I explained how I saw him change whenever she was around, how he seemed to become a different person. I told him I understood the crushing guilt he carried over her past, over her sacrifices, and how she constantly used that guilt to control him, but it was slowly destroying the foundation of our relationship. I cried as I explained how deeply she had invaded my life, not just our wedding, but even our honeymoon. I told him I fell in love with his kindness and warmth, but his relationship with his mother was tearing apart everything we had built. When I finished, I saw tears streaming down his face. He admitted he had no idea I felt this way. He said he had spent his entire life caring for his mother, living in constant fear that something terrible might happen to her. He confessed that he had become so used to putting her needs above everyone else's that he no longer knew how to stop. He admitted he knew bringing her on the honeymoon was wrong, but she leaned on his guilt and he gave in, convincing himself it would somehow be better for everyone. I told him that if his mother truly cared about him, she wouldn't have flown to Hawaii alone and left him behind. He nodded and admitted he had been blind to her manipulation until now. He broke down completely, dropped to his knees, and apologized over and over again. My heart shattered. I hugged him, realizing how much internal pain he was carrying. It became clear that he needed therapy, and if he truly recognized his mistakes and was willing to work on them, I was willing to give this marriage a chance. Within the next 2 weeks, Van booked appointments and began seeing a therapist. He also had an honest conversation with his father.
Update 3. Matt had no idea how bad things had gotten and was genuinely shocked by how far Naomi had pushed everything. His father told him the same thing I had, that it was time for Van to stop living in constant anxiety over his mother and finally start living his own life, without excuses. With the help of his therapist, Van decided to move to low contact with his mother. He understood that he needed space to untangle his thoughts and emotions. It wasn't an easy decision. Naomi was calling him non-stop, as expected. He hasn't told her yet that he's seeing a therapist. He knows she'll completely lose it when she finds out. He plans to tell her this coming weekend and ask for space. If she refuses, he's prepared to block her entirely. Overall, I see this as real progress and a necessary step toward healing our relationship. I know the road ahead won't be easy, but for the first time, I feel like we're moving in the right direction. Update 4, 3 months later. It's been 3 months since my last update, and I want to thank everyone who followed my story and supported me. The past few months have been an emotional roller coaster, and the encouragement from this community meant more to me than I can express. First of all, Van did talk to his mother after working through things in therapy. As expected, it went terribly. She unleashed a torrent of accusations, screaming that I had stolen him from her. She demanded that he divorce me, insisting that I was the cause of all the problems and that everything had been perfect before I came into his life. But this time, Van finally stood his ground. He firmly told her that he would no longer tolerate her manipulation. He made it clear that she had to respect our marriage and our private life. Then he made a difficult but decisive choice. He blocked her number. I did the same. It was necessary for our mental health and for the survival of our relationship. Of course, Naomi began telling anyone who would listen that her son had abandoned her and that she had been treated horribly. Gossip and rumors reached us through relatives and mutual acquaintances, but we stayed focused on our own lives. Matt, Van's father, played an important role during this time. He checked in on Naomi occasionally to make sure she was safe and taking her medication. After cutting contact with his mother, Van's condition noticeably improved. The constant cloud of anxiety and guilt that had followed him for years finally lifted. We started going on dates again, uninterrupted by endless phone calls. We were finally able to just enjoy each other. As for our honeymoon, Van wanted to make things right. He surprised me with a trip to Hawaii. This time, we both flew business class, and we had the calm, romantic vacation we had originally dreamed of. It was a beautiful trip, one that helped us reconnect and create a positive memory where there had once been so much pain. Overall, I feel happy and optimistic about our future, despite everything we've been through. My husband's growth and the effort he's putting into our relationship are impossible to miss. If anything new happens, I'll be sure to post another update.
7 years after our breakup, my ex showed up at my door with a child, demanding child support. A moment later, my wife stepped outside, and that was when my life truly went off the rails. Cindy and I met in college. We were both 23 when we started dating, and we stayed together for 4 years. After graduation, we rented an apartment and lived there for about a year, until she suddenly left me without any explanation. Cindy was a year older than me and in her final year of college when we met. I was painfully shy, so she was the one who made the first move. She asked me out. She was the first to say, "I love you." 6 months into the relationship, she was also the one who suggested we move in together after college. She was an amazing girlfriend in many ways, kind, affectionate, deeply emotional, but there was one serious issue: her overwhelming insecurity. I'm not sure where it came from. Maybe it was because I rarely initiated things in the relationship, or maybe it was something deeper, but she was constantly jealous and suspicious. She hated it whenever I talked to other women, no matter who they were. After a few arguments, I stopped talking to all my female friends. Cindy mattered more to me than any friendship. I cut off not only friends from college, but also girls I'd known since high school, people I'd been close to for over 5 years. Today, I'm back in touch with them. Cindy is no longer part of my life, and my wife has no problem with me having friends of any gender. But back then, I was only allowed to spend time with guys, and even that was restricted. Cindy didn't allow boys' nights, convinced they were just excuses to go drinking, get drunk, and hook up with someone. It felt unfair. She forbade me from seeing anyone without her because of her insecurity, but at the time, I couldn't fully grasp how unhealthy this was. I was deeply in love with her and believed she loved me just as much. She constantly told me she couldn't live without me, that she saw no future without me, that I was everything to her. So I stayed. I wanted to marry her. That was all I wanted back then. Over time, though, the relationship became harder and harder to survive. She grew more suspicious, more controlling, more unstable. Once we were living together, I couldn't do anything without her hovering behind me. She checked my phone regularly, tracked my movements, and if I didn't tell her exactly where I was, she threatened not to let me back into the apartment. By this point, it's probably clear how toxic things had become. What still amazes me is that despite everything, she was the one who ended things. The breakup happened over something incredibly small. One afternoon, my sister Lauren dropped by unannounced, something she occasionally did. Normally, she would message both of us beforehand so Cindy wouldn't get suspicious or think I had another woman over. But that day, Cindy wasn't home. She was visiting a friend. She was allowed to see her friends. I was not allowed to question it. Lauren and I talked for about 2 hours. Then her boss called and she had to rush back to work. Before leaving, she pulled out a lipstick to touch up her makeup, and in her hurry, she accidentally left it on the couch. I didn't even notice. Cindy came home minutes later, cheerful and relaxed, until she sat down on the couch. She jumped up instantly, holding the lipstick she had just sat on. I knew immediately that I was doomed. I told her the truth right away. I explained that Lauren had stopped by during her lunch break, that she used the lipstick before heading back to work, and that she must have forgotten it in her rush. Cindy didn't believe a word. She said Lauren usually texted both of us before visiting. This time she hadn't. Cindy also claimed it made no sense for Lauren to use lipstick at our place, since my sister rarely wore makeup. She was convinced I had brought another woman into our home. She completely lost control. She started screaming, swearing, throwing things, first pillows, then books, then she crossed a line. She grabbed the TV remote and threw it straight at me. I'd barely managed to dodge it. That was the moment I had to get out. I ran into the bedroom and locked the door. I didn't have my phone with me, so I couldn't call anyone for help. I sat alone in that room for nearly an hour while she screamed outside, accusing me of betraying her. She sounded unhinged. I was genuinely afraid. Eventually, the screaming stopped. I gathered the courage to step outside.
The apartment was empty. The front door was open. I didn't text or call her for the next couple of hours, assuming she went out to cool off, but when she still hadn't returned by midnight, I tried calling her. The call wouldn't go through. After a few attempts, I realized she had blocked me. I tried messaging her, blocked there too. She had also removed me from all her social media. I panicked and tried contacting her friends, but none of them answered. I later realized I was likely blocked by them as well. For weeks, I tried everything to reach her. She ignored me completely. After nearly a month, I finally gave up. I understood she didn't want to be found. I was devastated. The months that followed were the darkest period of my life. I don't even know how I survived it. I went to work, came home, missed her endlessly, and pretended everything was fine. People told me I was better off without her. I didn't feel that way. I stayed in that apartment for a full year, hoping she might come back. I thought if I stayed, she would know where to find me. When I finally moved out, I buried the last hope of ever seeing her again. We never got closure. That unresolved ending remains one of the deepest pains I carry. I fell into a severe depression and avoided women entirely, afraid that moving on would make me a traitor to Cindy. That changed when I met my current wife, Emmy. She was a coworker, warm, kind, welcoming, not just to me, but to everyone in the office. She was beautiful, intelligent, and had an incredible personality. Despite all my efforts to keep my distance, I fell in love with her within a few months. I'd promised myself I'd never enter another relationship after Cindy, but Emmy changed everything. We've been together for almost 4 years now, married for 2. I'm genuinely happy with her. And until recently, I'd almost completely forgotten about Cindy, until the day she suddenly reappeared in my life.
7 years had passed since our breakup, or more accurately, since the moment she erased me from her life as if I had never mattered, all because of a ridiculous argument. Last weekend, my wife and I were simply relaxing at home when someone suddenly rang the doorbell. I went to answer it. Before I even had time to fully process who was standing there, she shoved a small boy into my arms. He looked about 7 years old. Cindy immediately demanded that I pay child support for the past 7 years. She didn't give me a chance to say a single word. She started screaming, claiming that for 7 years she had been trying to find me so her son could finally have a father. She accused me of running away from responsibility and insisted that I owed her years of unpaid support. I stood there in silence while she yelled. I didn't even know how to react. I was completely stunned. I just stood there like an idiot while she kept shouting. The accusations made no sense. I had waited an entire year after she vanished, hoping she would come back. She was the one who left me, not the other way around, and I was absolutely certain that the child wasn't mine. I stayed silent only because I was in shock. I couldn't even speak. When Emmy realized I had disappeared for a while, she came outside to see what was going on, and that was when everything flipped upside down. The moment Cindy saw my wife, all the color drained from her face. It was instantly clear that she was in serious trouble. At the time, I didn't yet understand why, but it was obvious that seeing Emmy completely rattled her. Emmy looked just as shocked to see Cindy standing at our door. Before I could say anything, the two of them started screaming at each other. I couldn't even follow what they were arguing about, but it was obvious they knew each other. This wasn't a first encounter. They went straight for each other, hurling insults, throwing the most vile words imaginable back and forth. Meanwhile, I stood there silently next to the boy, trying to understand what the hell was happening. Then, Emmy finally brought out the heavy artillery. She told Cindy that if she didn't leave immediately, she was calling the police. That clearly wasn't an option Cindy wanted. She looked absolutely furious, but after one last round of insults and hateful looks thrown at both of us, she backed down. The moment Emmy repeated that she was calling the cops, Cindy grabbed her son and bolted as fast as she could. I had no idea what I had just witnessed. I assumed Emmy would explain everything once Cindy was gone. Instead, things somehow got even stranger.
As soon as the door closed, Emmy turned to me and started yelling, asking how I could do this to her, how I could hide something like this from her. I still said nothing. I just stared at her in complete confusion. Her accusations made no sense to me. She acted as if I had deliberately hidden my past relationship with Cindy, but that wasn't true. I had always been open with Emmy. I told her everything about my ex. The only thing I hadn't done was show her pictures of Cindy. Not because I was hiding anything, there was simply nothing to show. I had lost my old phone before we moved into the new house. Every photo I had of Cindy was on that phone. When I lost it, I lost all of them. On top of that, I had already deleted most of our photos from social media because they were too painful to look at. Seeing reminders of how she disappeared without explanation hurt too much. So, first I deleted the photos, then I lost the phone, and that was it. No pictures left anywhere. I never tried to recover them. Honestly, I thought it was for the best. Fewer reminders. A few group photos still existed on my friends' accounts, but I asked them to remove those too. I didn't want to see myself with her. If Emmy had ever asked to see what Cindy looked like, I would have shown her whatever I could find. But she never asked, and digging through other people's albums for old photos felt pointless, especially since Emmy never showed any interest. So she never saw Cindy's face. After everything that happened, Emmy said she needed to go stay with her parents for a while, to cool off, sort through her feelings, and maybe come back later. I begged her to stay, but she left anyway. She said she couldn't be in the same space with me right now and needed time alone to process everything. I didn't even fully understand what she meant. She didn't explain. The whole situation felt like déjà vu, like history repeating itself, just like with Cindy. I was completely crushed. The next day, I finally forced myself to start making calls, trying to understand what was really going on. I called her parents first. They immediately attacked me, saying I should have told them about Cindy beforehand and not let everything explode like this. They tore into me and then hung up without giving me any real answers. Desperate, I called Emmy's older sister. She was the only person left who might explain something. I was lost, and she was my last hope. When she answered, I told her everything that had happened. That was when I finally learned the truth. Cindy and Emmy were cousins. Cindy's real name was Cynthia. The names I'm using here aren't their real ones, and I never called her that myself, which is why Emmy never made the connection. Apparently, Cindy had always been cruel and had been tormenting Emmy since childhood. Their relationship had been strained for years, but everything completely collapsed on Emmy's 18th birthday. Cindy slept with Emmy's boyfriend, the one she had been dating for nearly 3 years. The entire family exploded. Emmy's mother, who was Cindy's mother's sister, caused a massive scandal over Cindy's behavior. Naturally, each side defended their own child, and the families completely cut contact after that. But it didn't end there. Cindy continued to harass Emmy by spreading disgusting rumors about her online. Things escalated so badly that the parents had to intervene again. Only then did Cindy finally leave Emmy alone, and only because her parents forced her to. The cousins never spoke again, until they met again because of me. After that conversation, everything finally made sense. I understood why Emmy lost control when she saw Cindy on our doorstep. Seeing her, or Cynthia as Emmy knew her, dragged painful memories back to the surface for both of us. I spoke to Emmy after that call. Her sister had clearly spoken to her as well, because for the first time, Emmy finally answered my call. Until then, she had been rejecting every one. I told her I understood why she reacted the way she did, but I also told her the truth, that she never asked, never shown any interest in Cindy, and that I never meant to hide anything from her.
That made complete sense to me. All of that was in the past, and she was my future. If she had asked me even once about Cindy, I would have shown her a photo immediately, and all of this would have been resolved long ago. I tried to calmly explain my point of view, but for some reason she still believed I was at fault, that I should have talked more about my past relationship. According to her, if I had done that,
She might have asked questions herself, and we would have discovered everything earlier. I honestly didn't understand what exactly I had done wrong, and I told her that. That only made things worse. She became even angrier and stopped talking to me, calling me stupid and self-absorbed before hanging up. She said she had gone through hell because of Cindy and expected me to understand that. I replied that I had gone through hell with her too, but I didn't see Emmy trying to understand me. That seemed to hit a nerve. She snapped, "Fine, you win the contest for having the worst ex," and ended the call. Since then, she hasn't answered my calls or messages. I feel like I completely screwed everything up. My wife doesn't lose her temper easily, so it was obvious this was a deeply painful and sensitive subject for her. But damn it, it was painful for me too. Putting all the blame on me alone felt unfair, especially when I genuinely didn't understand what I was supposed to have done differently. The only thing I was grateful for was that Cindy hadn't shown up again. If she kept inserting herself into my life, this mess would only get worse. Update 1. First of all, thank you to everyone who shared advice and thoughts. I truly appreciated every response. For those who asked whether my wife had ever mentioned being bullied in the past, no, she hadn't. She never talked about her childhood. I only learned about it after speaking with her sister. Even though I knew this wasn't technically my fault, I decided to take initiative and go to my wife's parents' house. I wanted to save our relationship. I understood that if I wanted to be with Emmy, I had to try to fix things, even if I wasn't the one who caused them. Because we're supposed to fight the problem together, not each other. Yesterday, after almost a week of silence, I finally went to see her. Both Emmy and her parents were surprised to see me at the door. I didn't wait for their reaction. The moment the door opened, I hugged her tightly. She froze for a second, then hugged me back. We stood there like that for several minutes without saying a word. The past week had been brutal for both of us, and we both realized that more than anything, we just wanted to be together. Who was right and who was wrong no longer mattered. As soon as I let go, she apologized and broke down crying. She admitted she had genuinely thought she'd lost me forever because of her outburst after Cindy's visit and the way she behaved afterwards. She admitted she acted irrationally and unfairly, apologizing over and over. Her parents and I comforted her while she cried. It meant a lot to see that she recognized she hadn't been fair to me. At the same time, I felt guilty for not coming to see her sooner, because that delay was what finally pushed her over the edge. After we talked everything through, she packed her things and came home with me. We're back together now. I can't say everything is completely back to normal, but we're working on it. We're slowly unpacking everything that happened over the past week, including Cindy's visit. And we still needed to figure out why she showed up in the first place. Update 2. We finally learned why Cindy came to our house. No surprises, she wanted money. She made that clear immediately by demanding child support for a child I had absolutely no connection to, emotionally or biologically. Emmy and her sister made several calls to figure out what was really going on, since the families hadn't spoken in years. They confirmed what I already knew: the child is not mine. Apparently, she had been seeing another man for years. I strongly suspect she was cheating on me during the final months of our relationship. I don't have proof, but everything lines up. She dumped me on the most ridiculous excuse and erased me from my life like I never existed. It makes perfect sense that she already had someone else lined up. Most likely, she was already pregnant when she left me and just needed a reason to disappear. The incident of my sister was the perfect excuse. Many of her relatives knew about the other man, but I was forbidden from communicating with her family unless Cindy herself was present, so I knew nothing and never would have if she hadn't made the massive mistake of showing up at my house trying to pressure me into giving me money. It turned out the man she was with left her a few months ago. She had quit her job when she got involved with him and had no savings after giving birth. When he disappeared, she was left with nothing. He did exactly what she had done to me, vanished without explanation. Now she's barely scraping by. Her parents refused to support her financially, saying they needed to save for retirement. If they supported her and the child, they wouldn't be able to retire at all. Harsh, maybe, but now her desperation made sense. After the incident at my house, none of Cindy's relatives have seen her. I'm sure someone will eventually track her down or report her, because rumors say she's already scammed a few people out of money. They're just rumors for now, but after what she tried to pull with me, I wouldn't be surprised if they were true. Update 3. We decided to start couples therapy along with individual sessions. It turns out we hadn't dealt with our past as well as we thought. Cindy's mere appearance was enough to throw our lives into chaos. We couldn't allow that to happen again. As for Cindy, according to some relatives, she's now living with a new man she met online just days ago. He's already madly in love with her and invited her to move in. Her parents are devastated, not just by her behavior, but by the fact that she told them they're no longer allowed to see their grandchild. I'm not taking her side, but honestly, what did they expect? They turned away when she needed them most, and now they're shocked things aren't fine. They've always enabled her behavior, towards me and towards Emmy. Her parents were never particularly pleasant people, and she's no different. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. What truly breaks my heart is that a child is the one paying the price for all her terrible decisions. That's where this story ends.
I'm 33 years old, and I haven't spoken to my parents for 3 years. The reason is my younger brother, who is now 30. A few years ago, he convinced our parents that investing in my business was a terrible idea. At the very last moment, he pushed them to back out, leaving me without investors after I had already quit my job. I'll be honest, I hate my brother, and not only because of that incident. I've hated him ever since I realized that my parents would always love him more than me. He was the classic golden child. My parents are immigrants, and in our culture, men are treated almost like royalty. We were never treated as equals. They didn't even pretend otherwise. It was always painfully clear that he would come first in everything. My parents are extremely traditional and believe that a woman's only responsibilities are housework, marriage, and children. That's it. I always knew they wanted their firstborn to be a son, but they got me instead. They weren't openly cruel, but it was obvious their affection was always directed toward my brother. Things might have been slightly easier if my brother hadn't been such a terrible person, but unfortunately, that's exactly what he is. He always knew he would be loved no matter what, and he took full advantage of it. Whenever I achieved something, he found a way to pull attention back to himself. One example says everything. On my 18th birthday, he suddenly announced that he was dating a college senior and planned to drop out of high school to live with her. Any parents would panic, and mine did. Friends and relatives heard everything. Of course, none of it was true, but that didn't matter. He ruined my birthday, and that's the kind of person he is. I still despise him. Once I left for college, I only came home when it was absolutely necessary. My parents didn't seem to miss me much. They had their favorite, and that was all they needed. Even our college send-offs showed the difference. For me, it was just family and a couple of friends. For him, they organized a huge celebration, invited everyone they knew, and even rented a proper restaurant. I never had any real expectations from my parents. I knew that once I became an adult, I'd be on my own. There was no chance they would willingly spend money on me. The only reason they paid for my college education was because my father was wealthy. Honestly, I was relieved they could afford it, because in their eyes, sending me to college was a waste. They believed I should simply get married after graduation and start a family. I begged them to let me study and promised I would be forever grateful. I think the chance to keep some control over me is what made them agree. That's just my theory, but I'm almost certain it's true. Either way, I graduated from business school as a top student and had no trouble finding a job. Once I started earning money, I told my parents I would eventually pay them back, though not immediately. They were disappointed. They truly believed I would start looking for a husband the moment I graduated. My mother was openly against me working and claimed it would be safer for me to just find a man and get married. She even said that the older and wealthier I became, the fewer men would want to marry me. It sounds horrible, but that's who my parents are. I don't know why they're like this. Maybe that's how they were raised. But people can change. They just didn't want to. I told my mother that times were changing and that independence mattered more to me than marriage. They were angry for a few weeks, but when they realized it didn't affect me, things returned to an uneasy peace. By then, I had already started paying them back. With a stable job and steady income, I eventually repaid everything in full.
After that, I saw no reason to keep up polite relations. It became clearer than ever that my brother was their only priority. We used to meet occasionally for lunch or family events, but once the debt was gone, I started seeing them less. Being around them was exhausting. They constantly pressured me to find a husband and get married as soon as possible, so I reduced visits even further. Another reason was that every meeting turned into endless praise of my brother. He also graduated from business school, but he was nowhere near my level. As far as I knew, he was a terrible student who spent most of his time partying. I never understood what exactly they were bragging about. What made it worse was that they never bragged about me, despite the fact that I held a much higher position and earned significantly more. My brother couldn't even find a job on his own. My father had to hire him out of obligation. He barely did anything and still got paid. There was nothing impressive about that, but I had grown used to how my parents viewed me. The only reason I stayed in touch at all was because I owed them money. Once that was settled, I focused on my career, and they didn't try to see me either. We slowly drifted apart. A couple of years later, a colleague and I started discussing ideas and decided to launch our own business. We spent a long time refining everything before I even considered approaching my parents. We had a solid business plan and all the groundwork done. When I went to them, it wasn't as their daughter, it was as a business person seeking an investment. By then, we barely spoke. Asking them for money felt uncomfortable, but my father was an excellent businessman, and his experience would have been valuable. My partner agreed that it made sense. Most importantly, they were our safest option. To my surprise, my parents were genuinely impressed with what we presented. They weren't awkward about the years of distance and clearly understood that this was purely a business proposal. I doubt they would have agreed if the idea hadn't been so strong. It had nothing to do with me being their daughter. My father simply loved making money. Unfortunately, it was only a verbal agreement. He said the paperwork would come after his lawyers completed an audit and once we had something more tangible than just plans. So for a few months, my partner and I kept our regular jobs while building the business on the side. We had a few potential investors, but my parents were willing to contribute the largest amount. To keep them interested, we worked relentlessly. After a couple of months, when about 75% of the work was done, I spoke to my father again. He told me he was impressed and ready to move forward with the documents.
My partner and I submitted our resignation letters the very next day after my father said he would invest and cut us a check soon. That check never came. A few days later, my parents called me over and told me they had reconsidered and no longer wanted to invest in my business. I still remember that conversation clearly. I remember the exact moment it felt like the world collapsed. I couldn't believe they were abandoning me like that. When I asked why the idea had suddenly become bad, even though just a week earlier they had fully supported it, I immediately knew something was wrong. I pressed them until they finally admitted the truth. They had spoken to my brother. He was the one who told them my business wasn't worth investing in and was doomed to fail. My father backed out solely based on my brother's words. I was in shock. I asked why my brother hadn't voiced his concerns earlier. My father said my brother had been thinking about it for a long time and just wanted to see what I would come up with before forming an opinion. That's when I realized my brother hadn't been thinking about the business at all. He was thinking about how devastating it would be if he sabotaged everything at the very last moment. And that's exactly what he did, like a sneaky, calculating snake. He waited until I had done most of the work and only then convinced my father to pull out, leaving me completely screwed. He played it perfectly and put me in an unbelievably difficult position. That day, I completely lost it at my parents' house. I screamed, said a lot of awful things about them and my brother, and stormed out. Then I went home to collect myself and figure out what to do next, because my partner was counting on me, and I couldn't let him down. I told my partner everything. I was a mess. He called me down and said we could still withdraw our resignations if the company agreed to take us back, but going back was never an option for me. So I started looking for other investors. We desperately needed funding. Our ideas were big, and our personal savings weren't enough. We pitched our idea to anyone willing to listen.
After a couple of weeks, we managed to secure several investors who provided the critical funding we needed to get started. The first few months were brutal. Endless work, sleepless nights, constant doubt. We kept asking ourselves if we had made the right decision and whether this would actually work. But after a few months, we broke even, and from that point on, things only got better. We never looked back. Everything we achieved came from our hard work, belief in our idea, and persistence. Despite my brother's manipulative plan, he couldn't stop me. I was meant to succeed, and there was nothing he could do about it. One upside of the whole ordeal was that I no longer had to pretend I had a normal relationship with my family. I already knew who they really were. Still, I had been willing to give them a chance and let them invest because I believed parents were the safest option. I had simply forgotten how rotten they were and how poisonous my brother truly was. They didn't deserve to be part of my business, and I'm glad they never invested. The thought of them sharing credit for my success disgusts me. They never apologized for abandoning me at the last moment, and after the day I stormed out of their house, we never spoke again. Honestly, I was relieved they didn't try to reach out. I wouldn't have known what to say anyway. But recently, they showed up again. They wanted to invest in my business. Of course, now that things are going well, everyone wants a piece of it. This happened just a few days ago. It was a Sunday. I was at home when they showed up unannounced. I've lived in the same apartment since graduating college, so finding me wasn't hard. When I opened the door and saw them, I was genuinely stunned. I couldn't imagine they had anything to say after what they'd done. Almost 3 years had passed and they hadn't contacted me once. Still, I let them in. Some naive part of me thought they might be there to apologize and make things right, maybe even try to rebuild our relationship. I was wrong. They came straight to the point. They said they had finally learned that my business was doing well and now felt ready to join as investors. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't exchange pleasantries, just business. In a strange way, I appreciated the honesty. At least they didn't waste my time pretending to reconcile. What stunned me was how confident they were that I would say yes. I could see it on their faces. They fully expected me to welcome them in. I laughed in their faces and told them it wasn't happening. They could leave. We had nothing to discuss. My father looked completely shocked. His face turned red as he struggled to respond. He said I had no right to disrespect him because he was my father and deserved respect, despite the fact that they had never shown me any. I told him I was giving exactly the amount of respect they showed me all these years. Besides, he wasn't there as my father. He was there as a potential investor. They were stunned. I could tell they wanted to argue, but I had no interest in listening. I told them again that I didn't want their money. End of discussion. My mother burst into tears and said she had always known it was a mistake to let me go to college because one day it would turn against them. She just hadn't expected it to happen so soon. I didn't even understand what she was saying anymore. I just wanted them gone. I told them to leave again, but they didn't move. My mother kept crying on my couch, saying how awful it was that I would threaten to call the police on my own parents. My patience snapped. I stood up and physically pushed them out of my apartment. I work out, I'm tall, and they weren't expecting it. They were completely stunned. It was easy to shove them out and slam the door shut. They left. I thought it was over. A few hours later, my brother called, furious.
He seriously threatened to sue me, claiming that I had physically harmed our parents and that I owed them an apology. According to him, I had no right to treat the people who raised me that way, especially since, in his words, they were the reason I became so successful. That sounded absurd to me. I was actually quite gentle, all things considered, and as far as I could tell, no one was injured. I also don't believe it's illegal to force people out of your own apartment when they refuse to leave. Still, my entire family began threatening legal action if I didn't apologize. I honestly don't understand why they're so furious, but it's exhausting. I don't know what to do anymore. Was I really wrong for physically escorting my parents out of my home? Update 1. A week passed after my parents showed up at my place and I threw them out, and after my brother suddenly decided to play the moral authority. My relatives launched a full-scale online harassment campaign against me.
It was a brutal week. At first, I even considered apologizing just to make it stop, to be left alone and end the harassment. But then I talked to my business partner, read the comments people left, and realized something important. It would never end. Even if I apologized, they would find a new reason to hate me. And there was another critical point. Apologizing could make it easier for them to file a lawsuit, since it could be interpreted as an admission of guilt. So apologies were officially off the table. The only thing I could do was block all of them and hope things would eventually calm down. I simply don't have the strength to endure that level of stress anymore. I also want to clarify something, because many people ask why I kept contact with them for so long despite how badly they treated me. Honestly, I don't have a perfect answer. I think part of me just wanted to have some kind of family. As I said before, they weren't cruel 24/7. Sometimes there were good moments, and I think I stayed for those moments alone. I'm talking about my parents. I never had a real relationship with my brother, and I'm relieved that he's no longer part of my life. He's practically a devil in human form. What he did before my business launch, convincing my parents to back out after all the work was done, was pure, calculated evil. I almost have to acknowledge his skill, because few people could come up with something so cruel and destructive just to ruin someone else's life. Update 2. I decided to talk to my partner about what to do next regarding my parents and the situation overall. I was worried that the posts my relatives were making might reach our business partners, which could seriously hurt our reputation. He told me the best approach was to ignore everything and act as if nothing happened. Eventually, they'd get bored. They have their own lives, and once they realize they're not getting a reaction from me, they'll move on. I think he's right, so that's exactly what I'm doing. Many people suggested I make my own post or respond publicly. I appreciate the support, but I don't need that right now. It would only create more drama. I want to focus on work and move forward, and that's impossible if I keep getting dragged into conflicts, even ones that no longer matter emotionally. Since my brother contacted me from a new number, I blocked his old one 3 years ago, I became curious about what he's been doing all this time. I had told my friends I didn't want to hear anything about him, but curiosity got the better of me. The last I knew, he was still working at my father's company. I asked a couple of friends, and they confirmed that he's still there and hasn't progressed at all. It's honestly pathetic. They also told me the company is about to be sold. That could explain why my brother suddenly tried to contact me. He probably wanted to attach himself to something meaningful so he wouldn't feel completely useless. And of course, there's also what my mother said, wanting control over me again. That would have been much easier if they owned a stake in my business, especially a controlling one. But none of that is my problem. I was just curious. They can do whatever they want. Update 3. Almost a month has passed since my first post. I shared a couple of updates and then got completely buried in work. There wasn't much else to say. My relatives stopped their harassment campaign once they realized I wasn't going to respond. My parents and brother also stopped trying to contact me. I think it finally became clear that I wasn't going to apologize, and there was nothing to apologize for. I did exactly what any sane person would do. As for my family, well, that's where things stand. By the way, my father's company was officially sold. I found out a few days ago through a friend. They made a huge deal out of it, posted everywhere, even threw a party like it was some massive achievement. What they may not realize is that there's now a very real chance my brother could lose his job. I can't imagine him being a competent employee. The only reason he worked there was because my father was in charge. Now anything can happen. It would be incredibly satisfying if he got fired. I know it's wrong to take pleasure in someone else's downfall, but honestly, I'd love to see his reaction. Meanwhile, he can watch my business continue to grow. I hope they're all paying attention because it's only getting bigger and more profitable. A lot of people asked whether there's anything romantic between me and my business partner. It's sweet that people hope for that, but we're just close friends. I do have a boyfriend, though. We've been together for a couple of years. I didn't mention it before because it wasn't relevant, and the family drama consumed all my attention. Yes, things are great between us, and we're even thinking about getting married in about a year. And guess who won't be getting an invitation? My parents had a chance, just once, to be decent people. As usual, they ruined it. That's where the story ends. I'm 33 years old, and I haven't spoken to my parents for 3 years. The reason is my younger brother, who is now 30. A few years ago, he convinced our parents that investing in my business was a terrible idea. At the very last moment, he pushed them to back out, leaving me without investors after I had already quit my job. I'll be honest, I hate my brother, and not only because of that incident. I've hated him ever since I realized that my parents would always love him more than me. He was the classic golden child. My parents are immigrants, and in our culture, men are treated almost like royalty. We were never treated as equals. They didn't even pretend otherwise. It was always painfully clear that he would come first in everything. My parents are extremely traditional and believe that a woman's only responsibilities are housework, marriage, and children. That's it. I always knew they wanted their firstborn to be a son, but they got me instead. They weren't openly cruel, but it was obvious their affection was always directed toward my brother. Things might have been slightly easier if my brother hadn't been such a terrible person, but unfortunately, that's exactly what he is. He always knew he would be loved no matter what, and he took full advantage of it. Whenever I achieved something, he found a way to pull attention back to himself. One example says everything. On my 18th birthday, he suddenly announced that he was dating a college senior and planned to drop out of high school to live with her. Any parents would panic, and mine did. Friends and relatives heard everything. Of course, none of it was true, but that didn't matter. He ruined my birthday, and that's the kind of person he is. I still despise him. Once I left for college, I only came home when it was absolutely necessary. My parents didn't seem to miss me much. They had their favorite, and that was all they needed. Even our college send-offs showed the difference. For me, it was just family and a couple of friends. For him, they organized a huge celebration, invited everyone they knew, and even rented a proper restaurant. I never had any real expectations from my parents. I knew that once I became an adult, I'd be on my own. There was no chance they would willingly spend money on me. The only reason they paid for my college education was because my father was wealthy. Honestly, I was relieved they could afford it, because in their eyes, sending me to college was a waste. They believed I should simply get married after graduation and start a family. I begged them to let me study and promised I would be forever grateful. I think the chance to keep some control over me is what made them agree. That's just my theory, but I'm almost certain it's true. Either way, I graduated from business school as a top student and had no trouble finding a job. Once I started earning money, I told my parents I would eventually pay them back, though not immediately. They were disappointed. They truly believed I would start looking for a husband the moment I graduated. My mother was openly against me working and claimed it would be safer for me to just find a man and get married. She even said that the older and wealthier I became, the fewer men would want to marry me. It sounds horrible, but that's who my parents are. I don't know why they're like this. Maybe that's how they were raised. But people can change. They just didn't want to. I told my mother that times were changing and that independence mattered more to me than marriage. They were angry for a few weeks, but when they realized it didn't affect me, things returned to an uneasy peace. By then, I had already started paying them back. With a stable job and steady income, I eventually repaid everything in full. After that, I saw no reason to keep up polite relations. It became clearer than ever that my brother was their only priority. We used to meet occasionally for lunch or family events, but once the debt was gone, I started seeing them less. Being around them was exhausting. They constantly pressured me to find a husband and get married as soon as possible, so I reduced visits even further. Another reason was that every meeting turned into endless praise of my brother. He also graduated from business school, but he was nowhere near my level. As far as I knew, he was a terrible student who spent most of his time partying. I never understood what exactly they were bragging about. What made it worse was that they never bragged about me, despite the fact that I held a much higher position and earned significantly more. My brother couldn't even find a job on his own. My father had to hire him out of obligation. He barely did anything and still got paid. There was nothing impressive about that, but I had grown used to how my parents viewed me. The only reason I stayed in touch at all was because I owed them money. Once that was settled, I focused on my career, and they didn't try to see me either. We slowly drifted apart. A couple of years later, a colleague and I started discussing ideas and decided to launch our own business. We spent a long time refining everything before I even considered approaching my parents. We had a solid business plan and all the groundwork done. When I went to them, it wasn't as their daughter, it was as a business person seeking an investment. By then, we barely spoke. Asking them for money felt uncomfortable, but my father was an excellent businessman, and his experience would have been valuable. My partner agreed that it made sense. Most importantly, they were our safest option. To my surprise, my parents were genuinely impressed with what we presented. They weren't awkward about the years of distance and clearly understood that this was purely a business proposal. I doubt they would have agreed if the idea hadn't been so strong. It had nothing to do with me being their daughter. My father simply loved making money. Unfortunately, it was only a verbal agreement. He said the paperwork would come after his lawyers completed an audit and once we had something more tangible than just plans. So for a few months, my partner and I kept our regular jobs while building the business on the side. We had a few potential investors, but my parents were willing to contribute the largest amount. To keep them interested, we worked relentlessly. After a couple of months, when about 75% of the work was done, I spoke to my father again. He told me he was impressed and ready to move forward with the documents.
My partner and I submitted our resignation letters the very next day after my father said he would invest and cut us a check soon. That check never came. A few days later, my parents called me over and told me they had reconsidered and no longer wanted to invest in my business. I still remember that conversation clearly. I remember the exact moment it felt like the world collapsed. I couldn't believe they were abandoning me like that. When I asked why the idea had suddenly become bad, even though just a week earlier they had fully supported it, I immediately knew something was wrong. I pressed them until they finally admitted the truth. They had spoken to my brother. He was the one who told them my business wasn't worth investing in and was doomed to fail. My father backed out solely based on my brother's words. I was in shock. I asked why my brother hadn't voiced his concerns earlier. My father said my brother had been thinking about it for a long time and just wanted to see what I would come up with before forming an opinion. That's when I realized my brother hadn't been thinking about the business at all. He was thinking about how devastating it would be if he sabotaged everything at the very last moment. And that's exactly what he did, like a sneaky, calculating snake. He waited until I had done most of the work and only then convinced my father to pull out, leaving me completely screwed. He played it perfectly and put me in an unbelievably difficult position. That day, I completely lost it at my parents' house. I screamed, said a lot of awful things about them and my brother, and stormed out. Then I went home to collect myself and figure out what to do next, because my partner was counting on me and I couldn't let him down. I told my partner everything. I was a mess. He called me down and said we could still withdraw our resignations if the company agreed to take us back, but going back was never an option for me. So I started looking for other investors. We desperately needed funding. Our ideas were big, and our personal savings weren't enough. We pitched our idea to anyone willing to listen. After a couple of weeks, we managed to secure several investors who provided the critical funding we needed to get started. The first few months were brutal. Endless work, sleepless nights, constant doubt. We kept asking ourselves if we had made the right decision and whether this would actually work. But after a few months, we broke even, and from that point on, things only got better. We never looked back. Everything we achieved came from our hard work, belief in our idea, and persistence. Despite my brother's manipulative plan, he couldn't stop me. I was meant to succeed, and there was nothing he could do about it. One upside of the whole ordeal was that I no longer had to pretend I had a normal relationship with my family. I already knew who they really were. Still, I had been willing to give them a chance and let them invest because I believed parents were the safest option. I had simply forgotten how rotten they were and how poisonous my brother truly was. They didn't deserve to be part of my business, and I'm glad they never invested. The thought of them sharing credit for my success disgusts me.
They never apologized for abandoning me at the last moment, and after the day I stormed out of their house, we never spoke again. Honestly, I was relieved they didn't try to reach out. I wouldn't have known what to say anyway. But recently, they showed up again. They wanted to invest in my business. Of course, now that things are going well, everyone wants a piece of it. This happened just a few days ago. It was a Sunday. I was at home when they showed up unannounced. I've lived in the same apartment since graduating college, so finding me wasn't hard. When I opened the door and saw them, I was genuinely stunned. I couldn't imagine they had anything to say after what they'd done. Almost 3 years had passed and they hadn't contacted me once. Still, I let them in. Some naive part of me thought they might be there to apologize and make things right, maybe even try to rebuild our relationship. I was wrong. They came straight to the point. They said they had finally learned that my business was doing well and now felt ready to join as investors. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't exchange pleasantries, just business. In a strange way, I appreciated the honesty. At least they didn't waste my time pretending to reconcile. What stunned me was how confident they were that I would say yes. I could see it on their faces. They fully expected me to welcome them in. I laughed in their faces and told them it wasn't happening. They could leave. We had nothing to discuss. My father looked completely shocked. His face turned red as he struggled to respond. He said I had no right to disrespect him because he was my father and deserved respect, despite the fact that they had never shown me any. I told him I was giving exactly the amount of respect they showed me all these years. Besides, he wasn't there as my father. He was there as a potential investor. They were stunned. I could tell they wanted to argue, but I had no interest in listening. I told them again that I didn't want their money. End of discussion. My mother burst into tears and said she had always known it was a mistake to let me go to college because one day it would turn against them. She just hadn't expected it to happen so soon. I didn't even understand what she was saying anymore. I just wanted them gone. I told them to leave again, but they didn't move. My mother kept crying on my couch, saying how awful it was that I would threaten to call the police on my own parents. My patience snapped. I stood up and physically pushed them out of my apartment. I work out, I'm tall, and they weren't expecting it. They were completely stunned. It was easy to shove them out and slam the door shut. They left. I thought it was over. A few hours later, my brother called, furious.
He seriously threatened to sue me, claiming that I had physically harmed our parents and that I owed them an apology. According to him, I had no right to treat the people who raised me that way, especially since, in his words, they were the reason I became so successful. That sounded absurd to me. I was actually quite gentle, all things considered, and as far as I could tell, no one was injured. I also don't believe it's illegal to force people out of your own apartment when they refuse to leave. Still, my entire family began threatening legal action if I didn't apologize. I honestly don't understand why they're so furious, but it's exhausting. I don't know what to do anymore. Was I really wrong for physically escorting my parents out of my home? Update 1. A week passed after my parents showed up at my place and I threw them out, and after my brother suddenly decided to play the moral authority. My relatives launched a full-scale online harassment campaign against me. It was a brutal week. At first, I even considered apologizing just to make it stop, to be left alone and end the harassment. But then I talked to my business partner, read the comments people left, and realized something important. It would never end. Even if I apologized, they would find a new reason to hate me. And there was another critical point. Apologizing could make it easier for them to file a lawsuit, since it could be interpreted as an admission of guilt. So apologies were officially off the table. The only thing I could do was block all of them and hope things would eventually calm down. I simply don't have the strength to endure that level of stress anymore. I also want to clarify something, because many people asked why I kept contact with them for so long despite how badly they treated me. Honestly, I don't have a perfect answer. I think part of me just wanted to have some kind of family. As I said before, they weren't cruel 24/7. Sometimes there were good moments, and I think I stayed for those moments alone.
I'm talking about my parents. I never had a real relationship with my brother, and I'm relieved that he's no longer part of my life. He's practically a devil in human form. What he did before my business launch, convincing my parents to back out after all the work was done, was pure, calculated evil. I almost have to acknowledge his skill, because few people could come up with something so cruel and destructive just to ruin someone else's life. Update 2. I decided to talk to my partner about what to do next regarding my parents and the situation overall. I was worried that the posts my relatives were making might reach our business partners, which could seriously hurt our reputation. He told me the best approach was to ignore everything and act as if nothing happened. Eventually, they'd get bored. They have their own lives, and once they realize they're not getting a reaction from me, they'll move on. I think he's right, so that's exactly what I'm doing. Many people suggested I make my own post or respond publicly. I appreciate the support, but I don't need that right now. It would only create more drama. I want to focus on work and move forward, and that's impossible if I keep getting dragged into conflicts, even ones that no longer matter emotionally. Since my brother contacted me from a new number, I blocked his old one 3 years ago, I became curious about what he's been doing all this time. I had told my friends I didn't want to hear anything about him, but curiosity got the better of me. The last I knew, he was still working at my father's company. I asked a couple of friends, and they confirmed that he's still there and hasn't progressed at all. It's honestly pathetic. They also told me the company is about to be sold. That could explain why my brother suddenly tried to contact me. He probably wanted to attach himself to something meaningful so he wouldn't feel completely useless. And of course, there's also what my mother said, wanting control over me again. That would have been much easier if they owned a stake in my business, especially a controlling one. But none of that is my problem. I was just curious. They can do whatever they want. Update 3. Almost a month has passed since my first post. I shared a couple of updates and then got completely buried in work. There wasn't much else to say. My relatives stopped their harassment campaign once they realized I wasn't going to respond. My parents and brother also stopped trying to contact me. I think it finally became clear that I wasn't going to apologize, and there was nothing to apologize for. I did exactly what any sane person would do. As for my family, well, that's where things stand. By the way, my father's company was officially sold. I found out a few days ago through a friend. They made a huge deal out of it, posted everywhere, even threw a party like it was some massive achievement. What they may not realize is that there's now a very real chance my brother could lose his job. I can't imagine him being a competent employee. The only reason he worked there was because my father was in charge. Now anything can happen. It would be incredibly satisfying if he got fired. I know it's wrong to take pleasure in someone else's downfall, but honestly, I'd love to see his reaction. Meanwhile, he can watch my business continue to grow. I hope they're all paying attention because it's only getting bigger and more profitable. A lot of people asked whether there's anything romantic between me and my business partner. It's sweet that people hope for that, but we're just close friends. I do have a boyfriend, though. We've been together for a couple of years. I didn't mention it before because it wasn't relevant, and the family drama consumed all my attention. Yes, things are great between us, and we're even thinking about getting married in about a year. And guess who won't be getting an invitation? My parents had a chance, just once, to be decent people. As usual, they ruined it. That's where the story ends.